If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1. It began, like all absurd ice guy do, with getting hit by a truck. He didn't see it coming. One moment, he was walking home in the rain, phone in one hand, greasy takeout bag in the other, half laughing at a meme in a group chat about how Goku could solo the MCU with one pinky. His thoughts were scattered between rent, boredom, and the distant decision to finally start watching Warhammer lore videos. People kept saying it was all grimdark and no one smiles and humanity is just meat paste in power armor. And then, headlights. A horn. Pain. Nothing. No flash of divine light. No god. No system screen. Just cold. Then silence. He woke up strapped to a metal table. The first thing he felt was fire. Not metaphorical fire, real, pulsing agony beneath his skin. Every nerve screamed. Tubes pumped fluids into him. Something was drilling into his ribs. Machines clamped around his skull. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. A rebreather was jammed down his throat. Figures in red armor stood above him, faces hidden beneath robes and metallic lenses. One of them nodded without emotion. Subject 117. Organs Phase 3 implantation complete. Proceeding with black carapace bonding. Another voice replied in static-tinged binaric. Gene seed stable. This one endures. Endures what? His thoughts were a fragmented mess. He tried to remember his name. His mother's face. The greasy taste of burger and soda. The words slipped from him like water through broken fingers. Then, something stabbed into his spine. And the pain returned. He lost count of how many surgeries they performed. Over weeks? Months? Years? They cut into him again and again. Organs were placed inside him, organs no human was ever meant to have. He overheard them mention them in passing. Laraman's organ. The multi-lung. Sinew coils. Ocidula. Catalepsine node. They told him nothing. But his body changed. He grew. Fast. His bones stretched and thickened. His blood turned thicker. Stronger. He could feel things moving inside him when he breathed. His reflexes sharpened. He began to see in the dark. Hear from kilometers away. And then came the neural drills, the mental indoctrination sessions. He was forced to relive battles he had never fought. Worlds he had never seen. The Codex Astartes was burned into his brain with painful chemical pulses. By the time he could stand again, he was no longer a man. He was something more. The instructors gave him no time to reflect. He was handed a bolt rifle the size of a car and shoved into a Thunderhawk dropship with other silent giants like him. They wore deep blue armor, each one a perfect killing machine. The symbol of the Ultramarines marked their shoulders. The twin-headed Aquila sat proudly on their chests. And on the lips of those who guided them, only one name passed with reverence and fear, Rabot Gil-Iman. The Primarch returned. The Imperium burns. The Indomitus Crusade begins. He was now one of the first true sons of this new age, a Primaris Astartes, engineered by Archmagos Belisarius Call, who even now still walked the galaxy, continuing his experiments under Gilliman's oversight. He was a weapon. Nothing more. His first deployment was to Rakos V, an agri-world under siege by Tyranids. The drop pod slammed into muddy ground. The hatches exploded outward. Bolter fire roared into the darkness. 1,000 claws and shrieks answered. He had no time to think. No time to pray. His bolt rifle kicked like a cannon. One round turned an alien the size of a car into mush. He turned, fired again. Then again. Another beast leapt, he ducked, countered, drove his combat knife into its throat. But not everyone made it. One of his squad mates was torn in half beside him. Another impaled on a talon. Blood, black, burning, acidic, splashed his armor. He didn't flinch. But something in him recoiled. He tried to remember how he used to react to death. To pain. To screaming. He couldn't. The decades passed. Then centuries. His armor changed, upgraded. His body became even more efficient, his strength increasing as gene seed adapted. Missions blurred together, each one more horrifying than the last. He hunted orcs across the shattered moons of Velkrad. Held the line against Necrons deep beneath the sands of Durinth Prime. He saw the skies torn open above Kadia's grave. He fought on a forge world where the gravity fluctuated wildly every minute, and servitors burst like overripe fruit. He purged cults from hive cities where the very air whispered lies. The longer he fought, the less he remembered of Earth. He could still say the words, Naruto, Stark, Peter Parker, Goku, Ramen. But they meant nothing. No images came. Just vague feelings. Faded warmth. Fiction, perhaps. Dreams. Shadows. What was Earth? Had it ever existed? Then came Orion 9. A shrine world. Holy. Sanctified. Now, twisted. The Eye of Terror had belched warp energy into the sector. Demons had erupted from the planet's surface like sores. The skies bled fire. The ground pulsed like infected flesh. He led a strike force. 7 battle brothers. All Primaris. All experienced. All ready to die. They deployed into a cathedral that no longer remembered the Emperor. Creatures from the warp assaulted them, flesh things with too many eyes, laughing skulls wreathed in flame, blood that crawled like spiders. They held the line. Until they didn't. One by one, his squad mates fell. He didn't grieve. He couldn't. By the end, he stood alone atop the broken altar, breathing heavily, blade in one hand, bolter spent. His armor was cracked, his blood mixing with ichor and ash. A great daemon, tall as a tank, stepped through a hole in reality, dragging a cleaver made from screaming bone. He activated his power sword. He would not beg. He would not run. He would die standing. Then. A sound he had not heard in 1,000 years. Ding! His helmet flickered. Data danced across his auto senses. Then. Multiversal Chat Group connecting. User located cross-dimensional signature detected. Link established. Welcome, new user. More text. But not in High Gothic. Not in machine code. English. Clear. Familiar. Human. Then came the messages. Tony Stark, did someone just join? Veteran of 1,000 wars? Dramatic. I like it. But seriously, who are you? Naruto Uzumaki, yo. New guy. What's your favorite food? Ramen or pizza? Choose. Saeko, another warrior. Sounds different from the others. Where are you from, Armored One? He froze. The daemon was still approaching. It howled his name more what it thought was his name. But the voice in his helmet, the words in his vision, they cut deeper than any sword. He knew these names. Not as enemies. Not as saints. But from before. Before the armor. Before the pain. Before the silence. Flickers returned. A laptop screen. A bowl of noodles. Laughter. A poster. A fan theory. His name. His real name. He could almost remember it. And he remembered, Earth was real. The daemon lunged. He snapped his blade into a high guard. Duck. Parry. Slash. The monster screamed, but he did not. He moved like thunder. He struck like judgment. And through it all, behind the centuries of blood and silence, he smiled. Just a little. Just enough. I remember now, he whispered. They were fiction. I have watched them. I knew them. Once. Chapter 2 The Ghost of Earth. The greater daemon collapsed with a final screech, ichor steaming from its split torso. Gaius Maximer Thasser stood over the corpse, shoulders squared, power sword humming low in his hand. His Mark the 10th armor groaned with stress, fractures along the left greave, blood leaking under the pauldron, warning sigils pulsing faintly in his HUD. He prepared for the next wave. And then. Multiversal Chat Group connecting. User located cross-dimensional signature detected. Link established. Welcome, new user. His helmet flickered. Text. In English. The characters were impossibly familiar, though he had not read that script in centuries. Not since. No. He silenced the thought. Tony Stark, new guy online. Veteran of 1,000 wars. All right, dramatic. But hello. You good? Naruto Uzumaki, hey. Another member. Welcome. Saeko, I see the connection stabilizing. That was fast. The interface glowed softly at the edge of his vision. The names, Stark, Uzumaki, Saeko, Gaku, they stirred faint echoes inside him. He couldn't place them. Shadows. Shapes without substance. He didn't move for several seconds. His grip on his weapon tightened. The last daemon's corpse twitched. He raised his bolt pistol and silenced it with a shot. Still, the chat remained. Alive. Active. Tony Stark, you reading this, big guy? Naruto Uzumaki, maybe he doesn't talk much? Saeko, maybe he's fighting, that would explain the silence. He didn't know why he responded. Discipline should have dictated otherwise. But he did. Gaius Maximer Thasser, I read you. A pause. Tony Stark, there he is. Thought we lost you. Saeko, the system called you veteran of 1,000 wars. Is that accurate? Gaius moved through the ruined cathedral, each step echoing over shattered stone. The air still stank of ozone and daemon blood. He saw no survivors. Gaius Maximer Thasser, Gaius Maximer Thasser. Naruto Uzumaki, cool name. Tony Stark, Latin? Sounds Roman. He stepped over the body of a fallen Primaris brother. His armor was scorched. One hand still clutched his combat blade. Gaius paused for a breath he didn't need. His body was a weapon. His thoughts sharpened like a monomolecular edge. Saeko, you're clearly in battle. Can you confirm your condition? Gaius Maximer Thasser, mission complete. Hostiles enemies neutralized. Squad, eliminated. A long silence followed. Naruto Uzumaki, sorry, man. Tony Stark, damn. You okay? Gaius Maximer Thasser, I endure. Gaius Maximer Thasser, there is no purpose in grief. Only the next engagement. He wasn't sure why he answered so directly. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was fatigue. The chat continued with strange familiarity, as though the others had known each other for some time. They spoke with comfort, ease, humor, even intention. It was alien to him. He had known only orders. Discipline. Ritual. War. Yet, for reasons he didn't understand, he remained connected. He found the remains of a shattered pulpit and sat, armor groaning under his weight. Tony Stark, so what's your world like, Gaius? Gaius Maximer Thasser, endless war. Naruto Uzumaki, that sucks. Saeko, that name veteran of 1,000 wars. Was it literal? Gaius Maximer Thasser, approximately 927 campaigns. 31 confirmed planetary theaters. The chat went silent for a moment. Tony Stark, that's quite the experience you got. I don't know whether to salute or call therapy. Naruto Uzumaki, do you have teammates? Friends? Gaius Maximer Thasser, I had a squad. They are gone now. Saeko, you speak like a soldier, but your cadence is slowing. Are you injured? Gaius Maximer Thasser, moderate damage. Non-fatal. He looked up at the shattered ceiling of the cathedral. The stars beyond it were dull and red. The warp storm still shimmered at the edges of the system. Tony Stark, sounds like you've been through hell. Naruto Uzumaki, you're not alone now, though. You're part of the group. He didn't know what to say to that. Part of the group. He'd never been part of anything except the chapter. The crusade. Orders and oaths. But this? This was not command. Not discipline. This was connection. The interface pinged one more time. A private message this time. Saeko, there is a function you haven't enabled yet. Live broadcast. It will allow us to see what you see, your environment, threats, allies. It can be useful in battle coordination, or conversation. He stared at the prompt. The idea of letting others, unknowns, see his world, his status, his face, grated against every instinct. But logic outweighed discomfort. If this connection was real, if they were allies, he needed data. And they needed context. Gaius Maximer Thasser, understood. Activating. He blinked twice. A soft click echoed inside his helm. The HUD shifted. A new icon appeared, live feed enabled. The others would see the aftermath now. The daemon corpses. The scorched altar. The bodies of his fallen brothers. The lone figure in blue warplate, sitting in silence amidst the wreckage. Tony Stark, well, damn. Naruto Uzumaki, that place, what happened there? Saeko, we see it. Thank you, Gaius. He nodded once. It was easier than speaking. And as the firelight danced around him, and the feed transmitted across dimensions to 4 strangers with familiar names, the lone Astartes sat in the ruins and waited. 4 orders. 4 silence. For whatever came next. Chapter 3 Ashes of the Faithful. The cathedral was quiet now. No more daemon shrieks. No crackling warp flame. Just the low hum of Gaius Maximer Thasser's power armor and the flickering glow of his HUD, the corners still marked with soft icons from the multiversal chat interface. He sat alone amidst the broken altar, bolter across his lap, the corpses of his fallen brothers cooling around him. Then the Vox crackled. Vox Priority Transmission Command Level Sigma all surviving Astartes, immediate retrieval of gene seed from fallen brothers. Rendezvous at evac point, Hive Capital Soloneth. This world is designated non-recoverable. Purification through orbital exterminatus approved. Time to execution, 2 hours, 17 minutes. The transmission ended. Silence fell again. But not in the chat. Tony Stark, wait. Did he just say? Purification? Saeko, orbital exterminatus. That means planet-wide destruction. Naruto Uzumaki, hey. Wait, like destroy. The whole place. Gaius stood. He said nothing. The movements were precise, practiced. There was no panic. No hesitation. The weight of the order pressed on no part of him. This was protocol. Duty. He walked to the nearest fallen Primaris. Brother hearken. The man had held the west entrance alone for 12 minutes. Gaius knelt, his gauntlets moving with sterile efficiency. A small drill and retrieval kit extended from his vambrace. The chest plate opened with a hiss. A pause. Then the careful extraction of the progenoid glands. His HUD logged the entry. 1 vial sealed. Stored. Slotted into a recessed compartment along his belt, just beneath the ridge of his power pack. Saeko, he's collecting their organs. Tony Stark, is there any need for it? Naruto Uzumaki, maybe it's similar to the Hyuga clan, who protect their eyes, not letting them out. Saeko, yes, it might be irreplaceable. Gaius moved to the next body. Brother Kasian. Then Brother Horrell. 3 more times, the same motion. Kneel. Open armor. Extract. Seal. Store. He worked quickly, but never rushed. There was no time for rites, no time for words. He gave each of them a moment of silence, a nod, and then moved on. By the time he had finished, he carried 6 vials of gene seed. Saeko, you honor them. Tony Stark, this feels quite sacred and grand. Gaius paused, only for a moment, then turned toward a half-buried archway at the far side of the ruined cathedral. His voice, rarely used, sounded through the feed with quiet authority. Evacuation protocol activated. Path to Soloneth Cathedral docks, 183 kilometers. Time limited. Motor unit, engaged. He approached the debris. Massive chunks of stone and rebar blocked the way, but with a few heavy strikes from his servo-assisted gauntlet, he cleared the opening. A vehicle waited within. Massive. Angular. Sleek. It was a custom-built ride, plated in ceramite, twin exhausts glowing faintly, armor woven into its frame. It looked like a fusion of a space marine assault bike and a land speeder, all reinforced into a single, purpose-built machine. Tony Stark, holy hell! Is that yours? Saeko, he must have had it made. It's too specialized for standard issue and too big for a normal-size human. Naruto Uzumaki, looks fast. Like really fast. Gaius mounted the machine. The engine whirred to life, the plasma cell inside vibrating with coiled energy. His HUD linked instantly. Machine spirit, responsive. Acceleration parameters locked. Trajectory path set. Warp field anomalies mapped. He twisted the throttle. The bike surged forward. The ride was violent, but controlled. Ash fields blurred past in streaks of grey and crimson. Shattered manufactorums loomed like broken teeth. Gaius swerved around fissures in the ground, past columns of smoke where warp-rent cultists still howled to gods that had already abandoned them. His reactions were near instant. One-handed steering. Power sword drawn in the other, slicing apart the occasional creature that strayed too close. He vaulted a crater. Accelerated down a collapsing overpass. Scanned a daemon nest and rerouted instantly. Saeko, I've never seen anyone move like that. Tony Stark, yet. Bike handles like a dream too. Suspension is insane. Naruto Uzumaki, whoa. That jump, that was like 100 feet. The chat watched, each from their own world, as Gaius tore across the dying planet. Soloneth rose from the haze like a corpse trying to breathe. The hive capital was falling apart. Fire and ash poured from its spires. Warp energy pulsed at the edges of its walls. Evacuation lights blinked across landing pads, and above, ships hung in low orbit, engines flaring. Gaius did not slow. He cut through a broken gate, avoiding collapsed statues and demonic wreckage. Cultists screamed and fired wild shots. He answered only with silence. Bolter rounds when needed. A quick slice when close. He didn't kill out of rage. Just necessity. One final turn. He approached the pad. A Stormbird-class gunship waited. Its ramp was open. The pilot inside saw him and gave a wordless salute. Gaius rode directly into the hold, parked, dismounted. He sealed the gene seed vials into a cryo-storage locker. Vox interior, departure confirmed. Ascending. Hold secure. Engines roared. Through the rear doors, the capital shrank away. The world darkened. They breached the upper atmosphere. And then, the countdown began. Vox announcement, Exterminatus authorization confirmed. Planetary purge in 3. 2. The chat went silent. Through the viewport, the others watched. Massive beams of energy, lances of solar-fired light, descended from orbit. The ground exploded. City blocks vanished. Temples melted. Warp rifts screamed as they were torn apart. The shrine world died. Tony Stark, they weren't evacuating civilians. Saeko, they might never intended to. Naruto Uzumaki, I thought you were saving people. I thought. He trailed off. Gaius said nothing at first. Then, in the silence, his voice echoed once more. The Imperium endures. Not all who live are meant to be saved. The live feed dimmed slightly, but remained active. The others didn't disconnect. Chapter 4 Echoes After Fire. The feed went dark. No more flame. No more screams. Just a flicker, then silence. Gaius Maximer Thasser has ended the live broadcast. In the hold of the Stormbird gunship, Gaius stood alone, the faint rumble of the vessel's ascent vibrating through his armor. The cryo-locker holding the gene seed of his fallen brothers sat secured against the bulkhead. The hatch sealed with a quiet hiss. He turned away without a word. The sun filtered down through the branches of the forest. The air was warm, humid, and filled with the distant rustling of leaves. Naruto Uzumaki stood in a clearing, a kunao in hand, his forehead damp with sweat. Jiraiya crouched on a tree branch above, watching. All right, let's try that again, the older man called out. Shadow clone combo, three-way strike. Let's go. Naruto didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the ground, expression unreadable. Jiraiya frowned. Oi! Earth to Naruto. You awake down there? Naruto blinked and looked up, forcing a smile. Yeah, sorry. I just zoned out. He went through the hand signs, creating two clones. They moved, but not in sync. The strike was off. The coordination sloppy. Jiraiya dropped down, landing beside him with a soft thud. That's the third time you messed up today. And I know it's not because you're tired. Something's on your mind. Naruto looked away, scratching the back of his head. It's nothing serious. Just saw something. In the group. Jiraiya raised a brow. That weird connection you told me about? With those other people? Naruto nodded. One of them, he showed us his world. He was in a war. Real serious stuff. And then his army just destroyed the whole planet. Jiraiya didn't say anything right away. Naruto continued. They called it Exterminatus. Like, full on, no one left. Not even the bad guys. Just fire from the sky. His grip tightened around the kunao. I thought being strong was about protecting people. But that guy, Gaius, he didn't even flinch. He just did what he was told. And everyone died. Jiraiya studied him for a moment. There's strength in protecting others, he said slowly, but sometimes, people are trained to follow duty over feelings. Doesn't make them evil. Just, different. Naruto nodded, but his expression didn't lighten. The wooden sword struck the training dummy with a sharp crack. Then again. And again. Saeko Busujima moved in silence, her strikes deliberate, her breathing steady. The kendo hall was empty now. She'd stayed late. Partly out of habit. Mostly out of distraction. The image of the cathedral still lingered in her mind. The silent marine kneeling beside his dead comrades. The fire. The finality. She lowered her shina and exhaled, closing her eyes. Not all who live are meant to be saved. She opened her eyes again. That line had stayed with her. Gaius hadn't said it cruelly. Just, plainly. As if it were simply fact. She wasn't naive. 4 years ago, Saeko was attacked by a man on her way home one night. However, she was able to easily overpower the man since she had her wooden sword with her. After severely injuring the man, the police released her due to the circumstances, but the events of that night left Saeko with a profound revelation. She discovered a sadistic side to herself that enjoyed inflicting pain and suffering. She bowed slightly to the dummy, as tradition required, then placed her weapon back into its case. The glow of the arc reactor lit up the dim room as sparks flew from the welding rig. Tony Stark sat hunched over the evolving frame of the Mark III suit, one hand guiding the tool, the other steadying the metal. Jarvis's voice echoed softly. Energy efficiency at 92%. Arc synchronization stable. Tony didn't respond. He was staring past the armor. On the table nearby, a small holographic interface hovered, just idle static now. The feed had ended, but his mind hadn't. He leaned back, pulling off his gloves. The suit's torso gleamed in the light, but Tony's attention was elsewhere. A whole world. Gone. Just like that. He'd seen war. Weapons. Damage. But never something like that. Not the methodical kind of extinction. He rubbed his face with a tired sigh. Tony. Pepper's voice made him glance up. She stood at the entrance, a tray in her hands. Sandwich, water, some paperwork under her arm. She tilted her head slightly when she saw the look on his face. You okay? Tony nodded, slowly. Yeah. Just thinking. Pepper walked over and set the tray down. That's not your usual I'm a genius face. That's the something's wrong and I don't want to talk about it face. Tony smirked faintly. Caught me. He looked at her for a moment, serious now. Pep, you ever wonder how far people go before they stop being human? She paused. Sometimes. Why? Tony looked back at the armor. Because I think I just saw the answer. And I'm not sure what side of that line I'm on. There was something deeper in his tone. Pepper narrowed her eyes. Is this about the meeting? As Tony was kicked out leadership, or any decisions powers over the company? Tony looked at her. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. But something about the way he held her gaze made the answer clear. He smiled faintly. I might need a favor later. Something, involving company files. Pepper crossed her arms. Sounds shady. Tony's smile grew a little. Just making sure I still have one person I trust. The void beyond the viewports shimmered with the shifting hues of the warp, chaotic, alive, ever writhing. Only the ship's Geller field held it at bay. Gaius Maximer Thasser stood at the command dais, in his armor, the blue and gold of the Ultramarine still smeared with ash. The bridge crew moved around him in quiet reverence. Some were mortals, novice helmsmen, vox servitors. Others were transhuman brothers assigned to the vessel's defense. He spoke, and all listened. Return to Ultramar. No transmissions. Maintain silence until emergence from the warp. Aye, my lord, the navigator said with a low bow. The men and women did not question. They never did. Gaius's name carried weight, old weight. He was from the first line of Primaris. Forged by Call. Deployed by Guilliman himself. Some said he had served in over 900 campaigns. Some said he never slept. All agreed, if Gaius gave an order, it was obeyed. He turned from the command dais and made his way to his private chamber. The doors sealed behind him with a hydraulic hiss. Inside, the walls were bare. Spartan. A single meditation alcove, a data terminal, and the cryo-storage locker. Nothing more. Gaius removed his helmet. His face was pale, scarred, angular, weathered by war, not time. His expression never changed. He sat at the alcove, eyes closed. And then, in the upper corner of his eyesight, a small icon blinked. Chapter 5 Orders from Ultramar. The void was calm as the Stormbird Iron Oath slid from the roiling madness of the Immaterium into the clear, cold light of real space. Before it lay the Ultramar system, 7 worlds bound by duty, industry, and the unshakable discipline of their chapter. The 7 worlds refer to the core worlds directly tied to the chapter's operations, recruitment, industry, and defense. Collectively known as the 7 worlds of Ultramar, they include Makraj, chapter home world and site of the fortress monastery. Talasar key naval base and trade hub. Kalth major shipyard and forge world, now mostly subterranean after heresy era damage. Prandium fertile agri world. Espander civilized world, renowned for producing officers and diplomats. Tarentus industrial powerhouse. IAX garden world and primary military training center. Though Ultramar rules over 500 worlds, these 7 form its political and military heart. Through the forward canopy, Gaius Maximer Thasser could see the proud curve of Makraj, its icebound poles gleaming under the distant sun. Orbital bastions and shipyards ringed the planet like a crown of steel. The vast fortress monastery rose from the northern continent like a mountain built by the Emperor's own hand, immovable, unyielding. It had been decades since Gaius last set foot here. In truth, the planet had changed little, Makraj did not need to change. That was its strength. The Stormbird banked gently, joining the traffic of void craft moving between the surface and the battle fleet anchored above. Its engines rumbled through the deck plating, steady and sure. Gaius stood in the troop bay, helmet held loosely in one hand, watching the slow rotation of the planet as the craft descended. In the centuries since the opening of the Great Rift, much had been lost. The Indomitus Crusade, glorious, terrible, and unrelenting, had ended. Rabut Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, now ruled from Terra itself, guiding the fractured Imperium through an age of near-constant war. Gaius was among the first-born Primaris, created in the forges of Archmagos Belisarius Call. He had fought in the spearhead of Gilliman's armies, serving with the blade of the Primarch, a strike cadre entrusted with the most decisive, most dangerous missions. Those days were gone. Now the wars were slower, drawn-out campaigns to retake and hold fractured worlds. The enemies were no less dangerous, but the work was different. Less conquest. More endurance. The Stormbird touched down on the fortress of Hera's upper landing tier. The deck crews moved with silent precision as the craft's engines wound down. A serf in the blue livery of the chapter approached and bowed deeply. "Brother Captain Thasser, the chapter master requests your presence. The Vauxhall is prepared." Gaius inclined his head and followed without a word. Minutes later, he stood before a massive hololith. It shimmered, then resolved into the form of Marnus Calgar, chapter master of the Ultramarines, his ornate armor reflecting the golden light of the chamber he stood in. "Brother Captain," Calgar began, voice firm but calm, "we have received word of renewed activity in the Helisar reaches. A cluster of worlds there, 2 agri worlds, 1 forge world, have regained limited contact after long silence. Reports indicate enemy occupation. Possibly Chaos Space Marine. Possibly worse." His gaze sharpened. "You are to lead a reclamation force. The mission is surgical: eliminate command elements, secure orbital control, and establish a forward bastion for follow-on forces. You will be assigned 12 warriors, 10 battle brothers, 2 Primaris reinforcements fresh from the Pharos. Equipment and materiel are preloaded on the Oath of Rectitude. She will meet you at the staging moon in 2 days." Calgar's tone left no space for hesitation. "You will have full autonomy once deployed. The Imperium does not have the time or the strength for drawn-out consultation. Do you understand?" Gaius bowed his head fractionally. "In the name of the Emperor, I obey." Calgar gave a single, satisfied nod before the hololith dissolved into motes of blue light. The hours that followed were precise and deliberate. Gaius oversaw the transfer of his war plate from the Stormbird's hold to the vaults of the Oath of Rectitude, which was even now preparing for warp departure at the edge of the system. By the time he stepped aboard the strike cruiser, the ship was alive with motion, tech marines inspecting weapon batteries, chaplains walking the decks offering words of faith, serfs moving in ordered columns bearing munitions to the armories. The Oath was no stranger to war, her very bulkhead seemed to hum in anticipation. Gaius kept apart from his assigned squad for now. Bonds would be forged in battle, not in idle conversation. For the moment, they needed to prepare as he did, in their own way. He retired to a private chamber near the stratageum. It was small by Astartes standards, just enough for a war desk, a rack for his armor, and a shrine alcove bearing the sigil of the Emperor. Gaius sits before his sealed armor's helm, linking with the multiversal chat. The icons flicker to life, icons resolving into familiar image and texts. Naruto Uzumaki, oi, Saeko. My Raisengan's way stronger now, lasts longer too. Believe it. Saeko, impressive. Keep that up and you'll reach Hokage level sooner than you think. Naruto Uzumaki, hat, you really think so? Tony Stark, alright, what did I miss? I've been busy in the workshop. Sends photo of unpainted, silver Mark III armor. Naruto Uzumaki, whoa. Is that armor? Kinda reminds me of Gaia's stuff and smaller, but shinier. Tony Stark, yeah, well, it's a work in progress. Needs a little color before it's save the world ready. Gaius did not speak. His icon stayed dim, but he watched. Their words were simple, almost mundane. It was conversation without strategy, without battle reports or casualty counts. For him, it was like listening to the sound of rainfall after centuries of thunder. Quite peaceful. Tony finally set his tools aside. That's me done for today. Pepper's calling. Stay sharp out there. Then his icon dimmed. The others lingered a little longer, Naruto promising to show Saeko some training moves next time. Then the chime sounded through Gaius's cabin transition to warp in 10 minutes. He closed the connection without a word. Reaching for the COMM built into his desk, he spoke evenly. Summon the squad. Briefing in 2 hours. Prepare for ground fall deployment of any time. The Oath of Rectitude swung on her axis, prow aimed toward the star's edge. Energy crackled along her Geller field projectors as the warp drives roared to life. From the fortress world of Macrage, she dwindled into a single point of light before vanishing into the immaterium, bound for another war, on another world that had waited too long for salvation. For Gaius Maximer Thasser, it was the familiar cycle: receive the order, make the strike, hold the ground. But somewhere in the back of his mind, the faint echoes of mundane conversation lingered, stubborn and strange. Not enough to distract him, but enough to remind him there was more to the galaxy than the endless march of war, in this grim dark galaxy. Chapter 6: The Blade Drawn. The stratagem of the Oath of Rectitude was a place of calculated purpose. Here, wars were not fought, they were designed. Star maps burned in hololithic blue, while the faint hum of the ship's systems throbbed through the deck like the pulse of a living beast. Brother Captain Gaius Maximer Thasser stood at the center, armored in the deep cerulean of the Ultramarines, helm cradled under one arm. His gaze swept the semicircle of warriors before him, 10 veteran Astartes, 2 newly assigned Primaris reinforcements. The light caught the gold trim of their pauldrons, reflecting off lenses and armor plates polished to a mirror's gleam. Brothers, Gaius began, his voice a steady, iron-clad presence. You know my name. You know my record. I will not waste time on reputation. We are here because the Hellesser reaches burn, and no one else can quench that fire. A starfield shifted on the hololith, centering on 3 highlighted worlds. Hellesser 3, Agri-world. Breadbasket for 5 surrounding systems. Now silent. Hellesser 4, Forge world. Its forges are cold, its manufactoria now serve the enemy. Hellesser V, Agri-world. Vast plains, now ash. Scans show atmospheric toxins, no natural cause. A ripple of static marked the change in display, picked captures of jagged fortifications, spiked banners, and armored warriors daubed in the blasphemous marks of the ruinous powers. The enemy is entrenched, Gaius continued. Likely Chaos Space Marines. Expect mortal auxiliaries in number. But they have made a mistake, they think these worlds are theirs. They are wrong. He stepped forward, letting his shadow cut across the hololith. Our objectives. Eliminate the enemy's leaders. Chaos warlords, dark champions, or demonic entities, all must fall. When the head is cut, the body dies. Disrupt their command structure. Destroy their strongholds, cripple their ability to coordinate, and leave them leaderless and blind. Prepare the field for the fleet. We are the knife in the dark, the Crusade fleet will be the hammer. Once we strike, they will finish the work. He let the silence hang for a moment. You will operate under my command. No hesitation, no deviation. I lead from the front, as always. We strike fast, we strike hard, and we do not stop until the enemy is broken beneath our boots. The veterans nodded, grim-faced, their trust in him unspoken yet absolute. Even the newly forged Primaris warriors, taller, bulkier, but young in the measure of the Adeptus Astartes, gave silent, unwavering nods. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, the name Gaius Maximer Thasser carried weight enough to still doubt and stir courage. Even amongst storied heroes like Commander Dante, his deeds had been whispered with respect. Though Gaius was younger, the blood he had shed for the Imperium had already carved his name into its endless war. He gave the final words with cold certainty. Ready yourselves. In 12 hours, we make planet fall. And when we do, we leave nothing of them but ash. The stratagem's lights dimmed as the warriors dispersed to prepare. Gaius remained a moment longer, staring at the star map, memorizing every contour of the enemy's holdings. War was coming, and he would meet it with a blade in hand. Elsewhere, the faint smell of machine oil hung in the air of Tony Stark's home workshop. It was late, or early, depending on how one counted time when submerged in engineering, and the room was dim but for the glow of monitors and the angular silhouette of the Mark III armor. Pepper Potts stood at the edge of the workbench, hands clasped nervously. You wanted to see me? Tony, still half bent over the armor, glanced up with that disarming, almost careless smile. Yet. Field trip for you today. He pulled open a drawer and fished out a small USB stick. Sleek. Unassuming. Deadly in the right hands. Pepper, he said, stepping closer, I need you to do something. Something, slightly illegal. Okay, very illegal. Her brow furrowed. Tony. Relax. You're just going to borrow some files. Stick this into Obadiah's computer, pull everything, and get out before he notices. Simple. She gave him that look, the one that could cut through his bravado faster than any bullet. And why am I doing this? Tony's smile faded, replaced with a rare seriousness. Because I think Obi's been playing a deeper game. I want to see if he's innocent, or if he's the reason I was out in that desert in the first place. Obi equals Obadiah. Pepper hesitated, then nodded. All right. I'll do it. Thank you, Pepper, Tony said lightly, trying to mask the knot in his chest. Later. Pepper's heels clicked quietly against the polished floor of Obadiah Stane's office. The man was absent, just as she had hoped. She slid into the leather chair, pulled the USB from her pocket, and plugged it into the terminal. The download bar crept forward. She kept glancing toward the door, the faint sound of the city outside pressing in against the silence. The moment the download finished, a folder opened, full of contracts, intercepted communications, and encrypted files. Her eyes caught one unencrypted video. A video, of the 10 rings, holding Tony Stark tied in he middle, then a member saying that, Tony Stark has been captured, but to kill him, the price has increased. Confirming it was Obadiah who ordered them the kidnapping of Tony Stark. Her stomach tightened. It was him. She pulled the USB free, stuffed it in her purse, and left before the bile in her throat could rise. That night, Tony was back in the workshop, the hum of the arc reactor in his chest filling the quiet. He was so focused on the armor's servo system that he didn't hear the footsteps until a familiar voice spoke. Working late again, Tony? Obadiah stood in the doorway, smiling, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Tony straightened. Obi. What brings you here? Oh, just checking in. You've been busy. Very busy. He stepped closer, hands clasped behind his back. You know, I always thought of you as a son. But lately? You've been making it hard. There was an edge now, not anger, but something colder. Then, without warning, Obadiah produced a small metallic device and pressed it near Tony's ear. A sharp, high-pitched whine cut through the air. Tony gasped, every muscle locking as if his body had been frozen in ice. He collapsed into the chair, eyes wide, breath shallow. Neat little toy, isn't it? Obadiah crouched down, his voice almost gentle. You think you're the only one who can build clever things? I've been pulling strings from the start. The board. The weapons contracts. Even your little vacation in Afghanistan. All me. Tony tried to speak, but only a strangled gasp came out. Obadiah reached down, his fingers curling around the arc reactor embedded in Tony's chest. This is what's going to change the world. Not in your hands, of course, but in mine. With a twist and a pull, the reactor came free. The sudden emptiness in his chest was like falling into a vacuum, every breath a war he was losing. Obadiah stood, pocketing the reactor, and walked toward the door. Goodbye, Tony. The door shut behind him. Multiversal chat incoming transmission. The flicker of icons lit up Tony's peripheral vision. Somehow, impossibly, the interface burned in midair, visible even as his sight dimmed. System message mission, save Tony Stark. Target, Obadiah Stane, kill or capture. Objective, stabilize Stark and cure palladium poisoning. Reward, postal system unlocked, members may send items to one another. Somewhere, in other worlds, others were already seeing the same message. For Tony, the words blurred, fading into darkness as he slumped in the chair, the sound of his slowing heartbeat echoing in the empty workshop. Bro, writing on 2 novels, are quite hard, I have to back-read each, so I don't break continuity, no worries though. Chapter 7 Steel and Shadows. The multiversal chat blinked awake in Naruto's vision as he was finishing a bowl of ramen. Mission alert: save Tony Stark. Neutralize or capture Obadiah Stane. Cure palladium poisoning. Reward, postal system, weight limit, 5 tons. Naruto's chopsticks froze mid-air. Tony's in trouble. He typed quickly. A reply came almost instantal. Saeko had seen the same alert. Naruto, I can fight, but I'm not a medical nin. I wouldn't even know where to start with, whatever palladium poisoning is. Saeko, same. I can handle simple fights, not medical science. They sat in silence for a moment, both clearly frustrated. Then a new name appeared in the chat. Gaius Maximer Thasser, I will go. The giant's profile icon seemed to loom even in the digital space. Naruto immediately leaned forward. Naruto, you think you can save him, Gaius? I have in my possession a relic from the dark age of technology, a regeneration draft. It can close wounds, knit broken bone, and expel foreign matter from the body. It will not cure disease or poison, but it may keep him alive long enough for the rest to be treated. Saiko's message followed almost instantly. Saeko, then you're our best hope. Go. In the cold steel corridors of the Oath of Rectitude, Gaius Maximer Thasser closed the chat window and made his way to the ship's navigator chamber. Gaius silently wonders if the multiversal chat could take him away from the endless, grim war and chaos of his own universe. The great armored figure moved with weight and purpose, every footstep a deep clang against the deck plating. The navigator, pale and robed, assured him that the Crusade fleet could hold its current position for 5 days without him. That was enough. Back in his private armory, Gaius began to prepare. His Mk7 Aquila pattern power armor stood on a servo-assisted rack, plates gleaming blue and gold under the harsh light. Each section was engraved with imperial laurels and kill tallies carved deep into the ceramite. His breastplate bore a stylized aquila, wings spread wide, talons clutching a scroll inscribed with the words honor in service. First, he checked the Godwin pattern bolter. The weapon was massive, almost the length of a human arm, with a matte black finish and a gold aquila on its receiver. He loaded a fresh magazine of mass reactive shells, each one capable of blowing apart a man-sized target in a single hit. Then came the power sword. Its hilt was wrapped in worn leather, grip molded perfectly to his gauntlet hand. The activation rune flared to life with a hum, surrounding the blade in a crackling energy field. Even without striking, the air around it seemed to vibrate with restrained violence. He took one last look around his quarters, then spoke aloud to the ship's machine spirit. Watch over my brothers. I will return. Accepting the mission caused the world to shift. The clang of metal floors slowed, then froze entirely. Light stretched into long streaks, colors running like wet paint. Gaius felt the strange sensation of being pulled sideways out of reality. There was a brief moment of cleansing, like a cool wind stripping away the psychic residue of war, purging every trace of the warp's touch. His armor felt lighter, cleaner. When the light cleared, he was standing in a completely alien place. The air smelled faintly of oil and heated metal. Blue holograms floated in the air above scattered workbenches. Gaius' heavy footfalls echoed against concrete floors as he stepped forward. On the ground near a metal table lay Tony Stark. His skin was pale, lips faintly blue, chest marked by a circular cavity where an arc reactor should have been. His breathing was shallow, each breath a struggle. Gaius knelt beside him. With one massive hand he tilted Tony's head back, the other uncorking a small metal vial. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, almost alive. "Drink," he rumbled, pouring it carefully into Tony's mouth. The effect was immediate. Color returned to Tony's face as wounds closed and faint metallic clinks hit the floor, shrapnel forced out of his body by the potion's work. His breathing steadied, but the faint, sickly hue beneath his skin remained and the hole in his chest was filled. Tony's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion reigned, then shock as he realized he was staring up at a figure that could have stepped out of a nightmare or a myth. Blue and gold armor filled his vision, gold trim catching the workshop's light. The man, if he could even be called that, had to be over 7 feet tall, his presence dominating the space. You're Gaius from the chat," Tony rasped. "I am Gaius Maximer Thasser," came the deep, measured reply. "The Multiversal Chat issued a mission on the chat, and I was the one who accepted it." Tony managed a weak laugh. "Guess. I owe you one." As Gaius helped him to sit up, Tony's memory sharpened. His eyes went wide. "Pepper. Obadiah might go after her." Tony swung his legs off the table, half expecting the sharp ache in his chest, only to find it gone. He touched the spot where the hole used to be, feeling smooth skin under his clothes. The Space Marine's helm tilted slightly. "Where is she?" "Stark Industries. She has the evidence on him. He won't let her leave alive, if she was ever found, and I won't let Obadiah go." Tony wanted to talk about how he was healed, but focused on the important matter first. "Then I'm not sitting this one out." He walked toward his workbench, pulling open a case. Inside, the crude but life-saving arc reactor he'd built in the cave gleamed faintly. Then walked to the Mark III armor, having it equipped piece by piece. Then after the torso was completed he put the arc reactor he was holding in his hand at his chest. The arc reactor was bulging out a bit, since it was design, with the arc reactor embedded inside him. Behind him, Gaius rose to his full height, the deep ultramarine blue of his power armor trimmed with gold catching the light. The polished aquila across his chest plate gleamed like a silent oath. His bolter was in his hands in a smooth, practiced motion, power sword mag locked to his thigh. The servos in his armor gave off a low, steady hiss as he moved. Tony slipped on the final pieces of his own armor, faceplate snapping shut with a metallic click. "Let's go." Gaius gave a single nod. "Then we move." Chapter 8. The warm orange glow of the city passed beneath them in streaks. Tony's HUD was a cluttered mess, flashing warnings, power draw spikes, and heat levels creeping too high. The Mark III wasn't designed to carry a man in a suit of armor that weighed at least half a ton and fly. "You're like a building with legs, you know that." Tony's voice cracked over comms, strained from the suit's groan. "Then fly faster, Stark," Gaius rumbled, his voice a low metallic growl inside the helmet. His massive gauntlet gripped Tony's right shin as the billionaire's thrusters strained against gravity and weight. "This is no time to complain." "Yeah, well, tell that to my battery." Below, Los Angeles glittered quietly, most streets thinly populated at this late hour. They cleared the last line of high-rises when the familiar outline of Stark Industries came into view. The tower's lights shone over the stillness of the surrounding business district. "Almost there, hang on." Tony grunted. His arc reactor output dipped into the red. He dropped altitude fast, letting gravity do some of the work. At the last 100 feet, Gaius released his hold. The sudden loss of weight almost made Tony shoot upward, but he corrected in time. The giant in ultramarine and gold fell like a meteor. When Gaius hit, the sound was less an impact and more a detonation. Pavement buckled, chunks of concrete sprayed outward, and a car parked nearby groaned as its suspension gave from the tremor. Alarms shrieked into the night. A handful of late-night pedestrians stopped mid-step. Two couples outside a diner stared slack-jawed at the figure in the crater, their fries forgotten. Someone muttered, "Holy, what is that?" Another voice, cautious, "Some new military thing." Gaius rose slowly from his landing crouch, armored boots cracking the pavement further as he stepped out. In the spill of street lamps, he was an overwhelming sight, easily 10 feet tall, his armor engraved with gold trim, helmet's eyes glowing faintly. Tony landed beside him, his thrusters whining from the strain. You always make an entrance like that. It serves its purpose, Gaius replied flatly, scanning the building. Xander, to look cool. Inside Stark Industries, Obadiah Stane was hunched over the stolen arc reactor, securing it into the massive torso frame of his ironmonger armor. A faint vibration from the impact outside rattled the tools on his workbench. Frowning, he crossed to the nearest window. His gaze fell on the scene below, the blue and gold armored figure beside a man in red and gold plating. Tony. Obadiah's chest tightened. He survived from me taking out his reactor. And that other thing, what the hell is that? Panic twisted quickly into action. He slammed the lab door shut and stalked toward the final assembly bay. The ironmonger waited, hunched like a predator in the shadows. Tony's HUD marked movement inside. He's in the East Wing lab, second floor. He's not gonna run. Then we take the fight to him, Gaius said, starting forward. Each step made the asphalt groan. They were halfway to the front doors when the building shuddered. A window above exploded outward in a rain of glass. The ironmonger emerged. It wasn't just big, it was monstrous, the steel plating thick enough to shrug off small arms. The arc reactor in its chest burned cold and white, casting hard shadows across its angular frame. Hydraulic limbs hissed, and a shoulder-mounted launcher rotated into place. For a heartbeat, there was stillness. Then the launcher's targeting light blinked red. Before the missile could fire, Gaius Bolter came up in one smooth, practiced motion. A single thunderous report split the air. The mass-reactive round hit home, detonating the launcher in a flash of sparks and twisted steel. Obadiah roared in the cockpit as the shock rattled the armor. You'll regret that. Doubtful, Gaius replied, stepping forward like a siege engine. Tony broke right, repulsors flaring. You take the front, I'll flank. The ironmonger's claw shot forward, hydraulic pistons hissing. Gaius didn't sidestep, he caught it. The impact rang like a cathedral bell, his massive blue and gold gauntlet locking around the steel fingers. His boots dug twin gouges into the asphalt before his stance set like stone. You fight like a brawler, Gaius said, voice deep through his helm's vox, but fight demands precision. In a single motion, he twisted, the monger's arm hydraulics shrieking under the torque. The armored behemoth stumbled, gouging trenches in the pavement. Before Obadiah could react, Gaius let the arm go, only to draw the weapon on his back. With a hiss of ancient power fields, the power sword came alive. A shimmering edge of light danced along the blade, its disruptive energy field crackling faintly as it distorted the air around it. Tony's repulsors flared, peppering the monger's side. Giant smurf with a glowing sword, mind explaining that later? No, Gaius said simply, stepping in. The monger swung a massive steel fist the size of a wrecking ball. Gaius moved like a duelist. The blade traced a perfect arc, its power field destabilizing the armored joint on contact. Metal shrieked as the elbow parted cleanly, the severed limb crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks and scorched fragments. Impossible. Obadiah's voice barked from within the suit. Nothing is impossible, Gaius replied, only inevitable. Pepper Potts arrived in a black sedan, stepping out to a wall of sound, metal clashing, hydraulics straining, repulsor blasts cracking the night. Her eyes locked on Tony, and her breath caught, but the blue giant fighting alongside him made her hesitate. Who? She started, but the nearest SHIELD agent cut her off. Ma'am, stay back. This is a live engagement, we might get into the crossfires. The monger lunged with the other arm, but the power sword's field carved through it in one fluid stroke. The cut edges sparked violently, glowing faintly where the molecular bonds had been disrupted. Smoke and fragments bled from the stumps as Gaius advanced. Obadiah tried to backpedal, heavy servos whining, but the Space Marine was relentless, each step like the March of Judgment itself. Tony blasted the monger's legs to slow him. You're gonna cut him in half, aren't you? Gaius didn't answer. His sword flared brighter as he brought it down in a diagonal slash that ripped straight through the monger's torso. The power field sheared the armor with unnatural ease, splitting reinforced plating like brittle glass. The top half of the suit slid off the bottom with a sound like rending steel, crashing into the street in a spray of sparks. Obadiah's cockpit was exposed, his helmet knocked free in the chaos. He looked up at the towering warrior, eyes wide. This isn't your fight, he croaked, coughing and gasping from the heat and severe injuries. Gaius didn't answer. The only reply was the cold, unblinking glow of his red lenses, locked on Obadiah like a predator judging its prey. With one armored hand, he seized the reactor housing, ripped it from the chest cavity, and let the remains of the ironmonger collapse into a smoldering heap. Tony landed beside the wreck, breathing hard. "Remind me never to fight you." "You wouldn't last," Gaius replied without arrogance, just stating fact. Sirens wailed, Pepper's voice calling faintly in the distance. Gaius deactivated the power sword, its lethal hum fading into silence. Chapter 9 Shadows After the Fire. The wreck of the ironmonger still smoked in the street, the night lit up with flashing sirens and the orange glow of scattered flames. Emergency crews swarmed the area, fire trucks, police cruisers, and paramedics fighting to take control of the chaos. A cordon was quickly pushed up, yellow tape stretching across the ruined pavement. Beyond it, clusters of shaken civilians whispered and pointed, some clutching their phones, replaying shaky footage of the impossible fight they had just witnessed. Two armored figures had battled like titans in the middle of Los Angeles. One was Tony Stark, everyone could guess that much. But the other? The blue and gold giant who stood like a statue in the firelight? Nobody had an answer for him. Pepper Potts didn't care. She pushed past two uniformed officers, ignoring their protests. Her heart hammered in her chest as she spotted him, the battered red and gold suit standing near the smoldering wreckage. Tony. Her heels clicked against the cracked street as she ran, ash and dust clinging to her skirt. The helmet on the armor lifted with a hiss of hydraulics. Tony's face was pale, streaked with sweat, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked exhausted, beaten down, but alive. When he saw her, his shoulders eased, just a fraction. Pepper didn't wait. She threw her arms around him, pressing her face against the soot-streaked chest plate. The armor was still warm, almost burning, but she didn't let go. "Do you have any idea what you just put me through?" Her voice cracked between anger and relief. Tony managed a tired smirk, his voice hoarse. "I've got a pretty good idea, yet." For a moment, the world fell away. The sirens, the shouting, the distant fires, they were all background noise. Pepper only felt his arms shift awkwardly around her, the hard edges of the armor pressing against her shoulders, and the faint tremor of his exhausted laugh. Behind them, paramedics tried to reach the scene, but they hesitated as their eyes locked on the other figure. Gaius Maximer Thasser. The Ultramarine stood in silence, his armored frame towering above the scene. Blue ceramite glimmered in the firelight, gold trim catching the glow like molten sunlight. His bolter was mag-locked to his side, his massive armored hands resting easily at his hips. His helmet lenses glowed a steady crimson, scanning everything, measuring, judging. People didn't approach him. They couldn't. He radiated something that felt too heavy, too overwhelming. And then Agent Carlson arrived. He moved through the cordon with his usual calm, flanked by a pair of SHIELD agents. He didn't rush or shout. He didn't need to. His presence alone steadied the nervous policemen and firefighters. He adjusted his tie, glanced at the wreck of Obadiah's armor, then at Tony, then finally at the giant standing sentinel at his side. "Mr. Stark," Carlson said evenly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Quite the show tonight." Tony let out a dry laugh. "Yet. Pretty sure I'm not getting my security deposit back." Carlson's lips curved in the faintest smile, but his eyes didn't leave Gaius. "Impressive work. Though I can't help but notice, you didn't do it alone." Pepper followed his gaze, and her hold on Tony tightened. She had been so focused on him that she hadn't realized the agent was already zeroing in on the other mystery. Tony glanced toward Gaius, then back to Carlson. "Oh, him? Yeah, that's just my heavy-duty intern. Doesn't talk much, eats a lot." Pepper shot him a sharp look. "Tony." But Carlson didn't even blink. His expression stayed calm, polite, but there was no hiding the curiosity in his eyes. His agents shifted uneasily, their hands resting near their weapons. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The firelight flickered against the blue armor. Then Gaius moved. The giant tilted his head, the servos in his armor whining softly. His voice rumbled out, deep and resonant, carrying a weight that pressed into the bones of everyone who heard it. "Primaris Ultramarine. Gaius Maximer Thasser." The words struck like a hammer. Even those who didn't understand them felt the weight behind them. One of Carlson's men stiffened, his hand brushing the grip of his sidearm. The other swallowed hard, eyes wide. Carlson himself didn't move, though Pepper noticed the faint twitch in his jaw. Interesting, Coulson said quietly. And, what exactly is a Primaris Ultramarine? Gaius didn't answer. His crimson lenses fixed on the agent, unblinking, unreadable. The silence grew sharp. Even the noise of the sirens and shouts seemed distant compared to the heavy presence of the armored giant. And then, with a hiss of hydraulics, Gaius raised one hand to his helm. Pistons released. Steam hissed out. The locks disengaged with a sharp clack. Slowly, he lifted the helmet away. Pepper's breath caught. The face revealed beneath the armor wasn't what she expected. Not a scarred monster, not some alien visage, but a man. His features were sharp and commanding, his skin weathered, his hair dark and close-cut. He looked like he might be in his early 30s, but his eyes were wrong. They were too steady, too heavy. They carried an age that didn't match his face, a weight of experience that made even Coulson falter. For the first time in a long while, the calm SHIELD agent felt his professionalism slip. The air around him seemed colder, his skin prickling as if those eyes could see straight through him. Is he even human? Coulson thought. Pepper, still holding on to Tony, felt it too. She shivered without meaning to. Gaius didn't speak. He only studied them, his gaze moving from Coulson to Pepper, then finally to Tony. His eyes thoughtful, almost imperceptibly, when they rested on Stark. Then, as if remembering something, Gaius glanced slightly to the side, though there was nothing there. Not to anyone else. Only he could see it. The faint overlay of the multiversal chat, hovering like a second layer of vision. A reminder scrolled across it in words only he could read. Mission not yet complete. He don't remember much from his previous life on Earth. But he do recall that Tony Stark survived the palladium poisoning and upgraded his arc reactor. The details of how it happened, though, have long since faded, lost to centuries of war and relentless chaos. With a faint hiss, Gaius lowered the helmet back into place. The locks sealed with a heavy clunk, the crimson lenses glowing once more. Coulson straightened, clearing his throat, forcing the chill from his voice. Well, Mr. Stark. Ms. Potts. We'll need to debrief soon. Both of you. His eyes flicked to Gaius one last time. And him. Tony, still leaning on Pepper for support, managed a lopsided grin. Good luck with that. Coulson didn't answer. He only studied the armored giant a moment longer before turning with a polite smile, his agents following close behind. The street was still a ruin, the night still filled with sirens and smoke, but for a moment, all Pepper could hear was the faint hiss of Gaius' armor and the steady, oppressive weight of his presence. And in the silence that followed, Tony muttered under his breath, "This is gonna get complicated." Chapter 10 Iron and Ceramite. The drive back from the ruined industrial complex was silent. Pepper gripped the wheel tighter than she needed to, jaw set, her eyes flicking to the mirror every so often. In the back seat, Gaius filled the space like a mountain. His massive frame forced him to angle sideways, armored pauldrons scraping faintly against the roof whenever the car hit a bump. Civilians and first responders had gawked as they left the scene, whispers rising about the armored giant who had fought alongside Iron Man. Tony broke the silence with a tired smirk. Here's hoping the suspension doesn't snap. Hate to see what the insurance company files this under, insurance scam, maybe. Pepper shot him a look, but Gaius said nothing. His helmet turned toward the window, lenses glowing faintly as the night rolled past. The ocean breeze was cool when they stepped out at the cliffside mansion. The contrast to the chaos of battle was startling. No smoke. No gunfire. Just waves crashing in the distance and 1,000 stars above. Gaius stood there a moment longer than the others, as though memorizing the stillness. For the first time since he'd arrived in this fractured reality, he sensed no whispers of the warp, no psychic taint gnawing at the edges of perception. Just quiet. Just peace. It felt wrong. And yet right. Tony led them down into the lab. The sleek white walls, glass panels, and humming servers were a world away from the grit of Warzones. J.A.R.V.I.SS mechanical arms descended from the ceiling as Tony stepped onto the platform, his Mark III dented and scorched. "All right, big guy," Tony muttered as the plates clicked loose one by one, "time to shed some weight. You planning to sleep in that tank of yours, or do we get a demonstration?" Gaius scanned the room. His instincts told him to refuse, never reveal weakness, never disarm in front of strangers. But Tony's gaze wasn't mocking, it was curious, almost reverent. After a pause, Gaius gave a slow nod. Tony raised his brows. Okay then. Permission to record this? Strictly for science. You never know, might come in handy if you want it put back together again. Granted. The Astartes' voice was deep, final. The lab's arms clicked inward as Tony guided the process, cataloging each step. Piece by massive piece, ceramite plating came away, greaves heavier than car batteries, gauntlets that could crush steel, the broad chest plate that thudded like stone when it hit the stand. What remained was the black carapace bodysuit. Thin by comparison, yet still an armor in its own right, latticed with fiber cabling and plugs that ran into the skin beneath. Tony circled him slowly, eyes wide behind exhaustion. Damn! That's not a suit, that's biology welded to technology. You're not just wearing it. You are it. Gaius inclined his head. Tell me this part comes off too, Tony pressed, gesturing to the bodysuit. No. The word was firm. It is bonded. To remove it would require a tech marine or me, and the risk is not acceptable. At removing it, and wearing it again, is quite the hassle. Tony lifted his hands in surrender. All right, fair. Then the lab arms pulled free the final sections, helm, gorget, vambraces, leaving Gaius fully exposed in the black carapace. His true height dominated the room, nearly 9 feet of corded muscle wrapped in the sleek underlayer. Scars traced his arms like pale lightning. Tony actually stepped back a little, his voice low. Holy hell! You're built like a damn battleship. A sound from the stairs interrupted. Pepper appeared, carrying a tray stacked with food, sandwiches, pasta, a jug of juice, even steak. She froze mid-step, her eyes locking onto Gaius' uncovered form. For a moment, the sharp executive mask slipped. Her breath caught. Tony noticed, smirking faintly. Pep, close your mouth. You'll make the guy blush. She cleared her throat, cheeks coloring as she set the tray down. I didn't know how much he eats. So I just brought everything. Gaius gave her a courteous nod, the gesture oddly gentle for someone his size. After a moment of awkward silence, Pepper excused herself. The door closed, leaving a mountain of food behind. Tony chuckled. Good thing, I happen to have a huge fridge and always stock with food. As Tony dug into the tray, Gaius' vision flickered with the faint glow of the multiversal interface only he could see. System message mission, save Tony Stark. Target, Obadiah Stane kill or capture. Completed. Objective, stabilize Stark and cure palladium poisoning. Pending. Reward, postal system unlocked, members may send items to one another. He dismissed it with a thought. The mission wasn't finished. Tony had pushed aside his own plate, pulling open the small reactor unit. The glow of the arc reactor cast blue shadows across his face. Figures. The thing keeping me alive was also slowly poisoning me, palladium, nasty stuff. Tony shrugged, like it was yesterday's hangover. Not a problem anymore, thanks to your miracle juice, but the design's still busted. I'll need a cleaner element if I want to keep upgrading this thing and making the armor more powerful. Too bad science hasn't caught up with me yet. Gaius' gaze narrowed. Fragments of memory stirred. From Tony's talking. That he remembered how Tony upgraded his arc reactor. Your father, he rumbled. He left you what you need. A model. Hidden in his work. The key to a new element. Tony froze, eyes snapping up. How do you know that? You're not from here. You're not even from anywhere in this universe. The Astartes' black eyes fixed on him. I know. For once, Tony Stark was speechless. Doubt flickered, but so did something rarer, trust. Exhaustion crept into Tony's voice as he finally sank into a chair. Tomorrow. First thing. Tonight, we deal with the press, and the fact half of LA saw us tear the place apart. From upstairs, Pepper's voice floated down. Press conference at 10. Don't be late, Tony. The time for conference should be at this time, but she wants Tony to have some rests, so she changed the schedule to morning. Gaius rested a massive hand on the railing, staring out at the city lights beyond the glass walls. For the first time since he'd stepped foot in this reality, he allowed his guard to lower. No whispers. No corruption. Just quite an extraordinary world. Chapter 11 Morning Steel. The first sound Gaius heard was the ocean. A slow, steady rhythm carried through the open window of the guest room, waves rolling against the cliffs below. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling, blinking once against the soft morning light spilling through. For a long moment, he didn't move. No alarms. No gunfire. No war cries. Only the sea and the faint hum of a house alive with quiet machines. It was strange, waking in peace. Strange, but not unwelcome. The bed creaked under his weight as he sat up. His body dwarfed the furniture, the sheets stretched and bunched around him. He was still wearing the black undersuit that clung to him like a second skin, the only layer he never removed. His bare arms were thick with scars, pale lines that mapped out battles fought long ago. He stood, the floor groaning faintly beneath his feet, and ducked under the doorway as he stepped out into the hall. The air smelled faintly of salt and roasted food. He followed the scent. The kitchen was wide and open, sunlight pouring through glass walls that looked out to the ocean. Tony sat at the counter already dressed in a sharp suit, one leg crossed casually over the other. A mug of coffee steamed in his hand, and a folded newspaper sat ignored beside him. On the long table nearby sat a spread of food, plates piled with eggs, bacon, roasted meats, sausages, and even cuts of beef still on the bone. Tony glanced up as Gaius entered. A smile tugged at his mouth. "Morning, big guy. Hope the bed didn't snap." Gaius walked in slowly, shoulders brushing the frame of the doorway. "It held," he said, his deep voice calm but steady. "Though I suspect only barely." Tony chuckled and lifted his mug. "I'll bill the repairs to Stark Industries. Take a seat. You look like a man who eats, well, a lot." The Astartes moved to the table and lowered himself onto one of the chairs. The wood creaked in protest, but it held. He reached for a cut of beef and lifted it easily with one hand. He bit through meat and bone alike, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Tony paused mid-sip of his coffee, watching with raised brows. "You know, most people leave the bone. But sure. Don't let me stop you." Gaius swallowed and gave a small shrug. "It is good. Well prepared. Glad you approve." Tony set his mug down and leaned his arms on the counter. His eyes, always sharp even when joking, flicked over the towering warrior. "So, what's your plan for the day?" "I've got a press conference in a couple hours. Going to announce the whole Iron Man thing to the world." Gaius finished the last of the meat, then spoke in his steady way. "That is your battle. Not mine. I would rather walk outside. See this world with my own eyes." Tony tilted his head, tapping a finger against his mug. "You make it sound like you've never set foot in a city before." The giant's expression didn't change. He only said, "There is much I do not know. Better to see it, than sit idle." As he wants to explore this world, this modern Earth world, where similar to where he lives when he was a normal human. Tony studied him for a moment, then gave a small smirk. "Fair enough. Though with your size, you're going to draw some attention. Though I might assume you'll not be in any danger." Before Gaius could reply, a softer voice came from the doorway. "Then Gaius might need this now." Pepper entered the room, carrying a folder and a slim suitcase. She was dressed neatly as always, though her expression carried a note of careful focus. She walked past Tony and placed the folder in front of Gaius. "Here," she said. "Paperwork. Birth certificate, license, passport. As far as anyone official is concerned, you exist." Tony leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Asked her last night to work her magic." "You're welcome." Gaius opened the folder with large, careful hands. He looked over the documents without a change in expression, though his eyes lingered a moment longer on the name Pepper had given him. Finally, he closed the folder and gave her a single nod. "You have my thanks," he said simply. Pepper offered a small smile. Then she opened the suitcase and turned it toward him. Inside were neatly folded clothes, shirts, trousers, even a long coat. Each piece had clearly been tailored to his massive size, the fabric strong but cut with care. Tony sipped his coffee again. "Custom made. Not easy to find anything in Colossal. Consider it a welcome gift. Don't say I never do anything for you." Gaius looked at the clothes for a moment, then back at them both. "You honor me. I will wear them." "Good," Pepper said, closing the suitcase. "Try not to tear through them in the first week. The tailor already thinks I'm insane." Tony stood, finishing the last of his coffee. He straightened his tie, slipping into the role of the billionaire showman with practiced ease. "All right, I'm off to tell the world I'm Iron Man," he said casually. He pointed toward Gaius with the empty mug. "Go explore. Jarvis will open the doors for you, and if you need your armor, just ask J.A.R.V.I.S. Well, just don't go breaking anything too expensive." Gaius gave a short nod. "Understood." Tony glanced once more at Pepper, gave her a faint smile, then strode out the door with his usual confident pace. For a moment, the kitchen was quiet again. Gaius rose, closing the folder and lifting the suitcase. He inclined his head toward Pepper once more. "Your work is efficient," he said. She chuckled softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Without another word, Gaius left the kitchen. The shower hissed with steam, water rolling over him in heavy streams. He still wore the undersuit beneath it, the black fabric clinging to his skin, soaking but never fully removed. The second skin was part of him, too much a bond to cast aside. When he stepped out, the mirror fogged with heat, he wiped a hand across the glass. For the first time, he saw himself not in armor but in tailored clothing. The shirt stretched slightly across his chest but fit, the trousers fell straight, and the long coat gave him a more human outline. He stood there, silent, studying the reflection. Not a soldier. Not a weapon. Not here. Just a man, walking among mortals. With the faintest nod to himself, Gaius turned from the mirror and stepped out into the sunlit halls of Stark's home. Chapter 12 The Giant Walks. The city was alive. Cars rolled along the streets in endless lines, honking at one another. People hurried across crosswalks with coffee in hand, voices rising and falling like waves. The air smelled of exhaust, fried food from street carts, and the faint salt of the sea carried inland. Gaius walked among them. Even in his simple coat and boots, there was no hiding what he was. His shoulders stretched broad enough to block the sidewalk, his stride long enough to cover three of anyone else's. He didn't push, didn't rush, yet people stepped aside on their own, drawn by instinct. Some stared up at him, others whispered, a few raised their phones to snap pictures. To him, it was strange and yet nostalgic. He lives now as a Primaris Ultramarine, a warrior of the Imperium fighting for humanity. Yet in this place, he feels a strange pull, something both alien and nostalgic. Once, long ago, he had been an ordinary man from a real world, before the surgeries and the centuries of war, that remade him into a Primaris. Peace. He let the thought settle in his mind as his boots struck the pavement, heavy but steady. There was no gunfire in the distance. No alarms, no screams. Only the sound of traffic and laughter, mixed with the endless chatter of millions of people. For a moment, it felt almost unreal. At a food cart on the corner, a vendor flipped sausages over a sizzling grill. Smoke and spice drifted into the air. The man caught sight of Gaius as he passed and froze, spatula still in hand. "Hey, big guy!" the vendor called out, forcing a laugh. "You want a hot dog? On the house. You look like you could use one." Gaius stopped, his shadow falling over the stand. The vendor's smile faltered when he realized just how tall the man before him was. Still, he held out the bun like an offering. Gaius accepted it with one hand, the hot dog looking almost comically small in palm. He studied it for a second before taking a single bite that finished half of it. The vendor gawked as the massive stranger chewed once and swallowed. "Good," Gaius said simply, his voice deep but calm. He gave a single nod of thanks and walked on, the crowd parting for him once more. The vendor just stared after him, mouth open. "Holy crap," he muttered. A small boy clung to his mother's hand near the curb, eyes wide as Gaius passed. "Mom! Mom, is he a superhero?" The woman tugged the boy away quickly, embarrassed. "Don't point, honey. Come on." The boy's voice carried as he was pulled along. "But he looks cooler than Superman." Gaius glanced after them, but said nothing. Everywhere he looked, the world was alive in ways that stirred something inside him. Neon lights flickered over shop windows. Street performers drummed on buckets while strangers tossed coins into their cases. Young couples leaned close, whispering and laughing in the shade of trees that lined the boulevard. So many small, ordinary things. Things that could never have lasted where he came from. A faint weight pressed against his chest at the thought. Nostalgia, perhaps. A world where people, can live and die of old age, not die in war. Here, it was real. And he, a giant shaped for battle, was the one who felt out of place. Still, not everyone looked at him with innocent wonder. Across the street, a man in a suit pretended to read a newspaper, though his eyes flicked up far too often. Another leaned against a lamp post, murmuring into a hidden earpiece. Two dark SUVs crawled along the road at the same pace Gaius walked, never overtaking him. On a rooftop, the glint of a long camera lens caught the sun. They were trying to blend in. To anyone else, they might have. To Gaius, they were as clear as torchlight in the dark. He said nothing, changed nothing in his stride. Let them watch. Let them think him unaware. Patience had been carved into him long ago. As the sun lowered, the city grew even brighter. Signs lit up in every color, painting the streets in blues, reds, and golds. The noise didn't lessen, it grew, alive with music, cars, and voices. Gaius stopped at the edge of a wide plaza. A fountain sprayed water into the air, its streams glowing in the light. Children ran around it laughing, their parents calling after them. Couples sat on the steps, sharing food. He stood there for a long moment, silent, watching the life around him. This, too, felt unreal. Not because it was impossible. He who has traveled across the Imperium, from one end of the galaxy to the other. Most worlds he encountered were places where people lived short, harsh lives, crushed by oppression, enslaved by cruelty, or consumed by endless war. Only within the realm of Ultramar did he see something different, a place where citizens could hope to live full lives, even dying of old age, under the just rule of Robot Guilliman and the Ultramarines. Behind him, engines rumbled. The dark SUVs had stopped again at the far end of the plaza. Men in suits stepped out slowly, moving into position among the crowd as if they belonged. They didn't come closer, not yet. Gaius felt their eyes on his back. He didn't turn. Instead, he began walking once more, the crowd flowing around him without ever touching him. Children still pointed. Phones still clicked. Voices still whispered. Chapter 13 Shadows in the Alley. The plaza behind him faded into silence as he walks further to the crowd. Gaius walked with long, deliberate strides, not hurrying, not glancing back. He could feel the hunters now. 10 of them, circling the block, the weight of their eyes pressing against his back. Men and women in black suits, moving with the shallow discipline of soldiers who had never known a real war. Their steps were too even, too measured. They thought the hunt was theirs. Gaius turned into a narrow alley between two buildings, the street lamps dim and flickering above. The stench of old garbage and oil hung heavy. It was a dead end ahead, brick wall rising high. Perfect. He let his boots echo on the pavement, each step deliberate, before he stopped and stood still in the shadow of the wall. 3 followed. A woman with sharp eyes, 2 men flanking her. All young. All armed. They entered the alley with a predator's confidence, the woman speaking first. Stop right there, she ordered, voice steady. Hands where we can see them. Gaius did not turn. He remained still, towering, the collar of his coat shadowing most of his face. Beneath the layers of worn fabric, his undersuit clung to his massive frame, unseen but ready. Sir! The taller of the men barked. You are under arrest. On your knees. Their words were noise. Gaius tilted his head slightly, listening. He counted the footfalls beyond the alley, the shuffling of more boots, rifles being shouldered. The rest of the pack was ready. Good. He bent his knees, coiled, and then leapt. The 3 below gasped as his massive form blurred upward, clinging to the brick wall like some armored beast. Dust rained down as he landed silently above them. They spun, weapons half raised, eyes darting to the wall, and then a heavy thud shook the ground. Gaius dropped behind them, blocking the mouth of the alley with his body. His shadow swallowed theirs. The woman's breath caught. The 2 men froze, fingers tight on their triggers. Gaius stepped forward. You don't know what you're hunting, his voice was low, iron scraping stone. Stop! The shorter man shouted, pistol trembling. Another step and we fire. They fired anyway. Muzzle flashes stuttered, bullets snapping through the dark. Gaius surged forward, impossibly fast for his size. 1 round grazed his cheek, another struck his coat. He ignored them. His hand shot out, wrapping around the throat of the nearest man. The pistol clattered to the ground as the agent kicked and clawed. Gaius lifted him clear off the ground with one arm, using the body as a shield as the other two kept firing. Bullets ripped into their own comrade's chest, blood spraying across Gaius' hand. The man gurgled, eyes bulging, fingers clawing weakly. Gaius squeezed once. The neck crumpled with a sharp crack, the head twisting unnaturally. He hurled the corpse aside like trash, the limp body smashing into the wall. The woman screamed, raising her pistol higher. She barely got the muzzle up before Gaius was on her. His hand engulfed her skull entirely. She thrashed, boots kicking against him. He squeezed. The sound was wet, brittle. Bone splintered, skin ruptured. Her skull collapsed in his palm like rotten fruit, blood and fragments spilling between his fingers. Her body twitched once, then went still. The last agent froze in horror, pistol shaking. He fired again, round slamming into Gaius' chest at near point-blank range. Gaius didn't flinch. The Primaris stepped in, caught the man's arm mid-shot, and twisted. The elbow snapped backwards, bone jutting out. The man screamed. Gaius silenced him with a blow to the chest. The massive fist drove into his sternum, ribs shattering, lungs collapsing under the impact. The agent staggered, eyes wide, before falling face first onto the concrete. The alley was silent again. Only the drip of blood, the metallic tang heavy in the air. Gaius exhaled once, steady, like a man adjusting his stance after training. His hands were red, his coat spattered. He left the three bodies where they lay and turned toward the street. The reinforcements had arrived. Two dark SUVs screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth. Doors slammed open, rifles raised, agents pouring out in disciplined lines. The first shouted into a radio, the others leveled their weapons. There he is! Engage! Engage! Gunfire erupted, deafening in the narrow street. Gaius charged. He broke from the alley like a storm, bullets hammering into his frame. Pain was nothing. He had felt the claws of demons carve into his organs, this was a breeze against his undersuit armor. The nearest SUV was his first target. He slammed his fist into the driver's side window, glass exploding inward. With one hand he dragged the driver screaming out of the seat and snapped his neck with a twist. The corpse was discarded before the echoes faded. The door was still attached. Gaius tore it free with a wrench of his arm, the metal screeching as bolts snapped. He spun and hurled it across the street. It smashed into a second SUV as agents were stepping out, crushing two flat against the metal and hurling them into the pavement with broken spines. Panic rippled through the squad. They fired wildly now, some shouting to fall back, others screaming for more men. Gaius advanced without pause. One agent braced and fired a burst at his head. Gaius closed the distance in 3 strides and seized him by the chest. Fingers dug deep, crushing ribs until the man shrieked. Then Gaius slammed him into the hood of the SUV, leaving a crater of twisted steel. Another tried to retreat into the vehicle. Gaius caught him by the leg and yanked, tearing him bodily from the SUV. The agent hit the pavement hard, bones snapping audibly. Gaius raised a boot and brought it down. The skull split open under the weight, blood painting the ground. Screams filled the air now. Civilians at the far end of the block fled in terror as the firefight dissolved into slaughter. 3 agents rallied together, rifles aimed, shouting to focus fire. Gaius ran straight into their line. Their shots tore into his coat, into the meat of his arms, as the undersuit reached only to elbows, but it didn't slow him. He swung a backhand. The force caught one across the jaw, snapping his neck instantly. The second was grabbed by the throat and lifted. Gaius squeezed until the airway collapsed, then used the corpse as a weapon, flinging it into the third with bone-crunching force. The last survivor crawled backward on hands and knees, eyes wide, pleading incoherently. Gaius loomed over him, silent, expression cold as stone. Without a word, he stamped down, crushing the man's skull beneath his heel. The street was quiet now. Blood pooled, bodies lay broken, SUVs wrecked. The acrid smell of gunpowder and gore clung to the air. Gaius stood among it all, broad chest rising and falling steadily. His coat hung in tatters, but his eyes burned steady and clear. Chapter 14 The Unwelcome Truth. The street was still and heavy with the stench of blood and gunpowder. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but none had reached the block yet. The broken bodies of men in suits lay scattered across the ground. Their black SUVs sat twisted, some burning quietly, others dented and torn like tin cans. Gaius stood at the center of it all, broad and calm, as if the chaos around him was only a ripple in his path. His coat was torn to shreds, his massive frame and thick undersuit visible beneath. His arms glistened with blood, most of it not his own. He said nothing. He only waited. The deep hum of another engine rolled through the street. Another black SUV pulled in from the far end, slowing carefully as it approached the scene. Unlike the others, its movements were calm, measured. The vehicle stopped, and 4 figures stepped out. Leading them was a man in a dark suit, calm eyes behind a thin smile that didn't reach his face. His hair was neatly combed, his stance neither rushed nor afraid. Phil Coulson. Behind him, 3 agents fanned out, 2 with rifles slung low, not aimed, and a woman with a tablet clutched against her chest. Their expressions betrayed unease. They had never seen a scene like this. Coulson's eyes moved across the carnage. The corpses. The crushed cars. The splintered pavement. His jaw tensed, but he hid it well. He gave a short breath through his nose and then stepped forward. "That's a lot of bodies," Coulson said quietly, his voice steady. He stopped about 10 paces from Gaius, raising his hands slightly, palms open. "I'm going to ask this carefully, what happened here?" Gaius turned his head toward him. His eyes were clear, steady, but carried a weight that made Coulson's chest tighten. For a long moment, the giant said nothing. Then, slowly, he raised his arms. The sound of tearing cloth echoed in the silence as he stripped away what was left of his coat and shirt, tossing the shredded fabric to the ground. His massive torso loomed in the streetlight, clad only in the black armored undersuit that clung to him like a second skin. As Coulson and his agents watched, a strange sound followed, small metallic clicks, sharp like pebbles falling. Bullets, dozens of them, began dropping from his arms and chest. They clattered against the asphalt, rolling across the street. The 2 agents behind Coulson stiffened, rifles tightening in their hands. Gaius flexed his forearms. The wounds where bullets had torn into him were already clotting, closing the wound, weakening the bleeding, then stopping altogether. The skin was knitting back together by the blood turning into clots, leaving only blood clots marks. "Sir," one of Coulson's men whispered sharply, crouching near a body. He lifted part of a torn jacket from one of the dead agents. His voice shook as he held it up. "Look at this. It's one of ours." On the shredded fabric, clear as day, was the patch. A circle with the eagle crest. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. Coulson's calm mask cracked. His eyes widened as he stared at the insignia, then flicked back to Gaius, who was watching him with the stillness of a predator measuring a man's honesty. "That's not possible," Coulson muttered under his breath. These were supposed to be our men." The agent who had found the patch turned pale. "Sir, why would our organization be trying to kill him?" "That's..." Coulson cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. His voice stayed low but firm. "Quiet." He thought fast, his mind racing. Fury had ordered surveillance on Gaius, yes, but not a direct strike. And certainly not without his knowledge. These weren't his people. If they carried SHIELD uniforms and gear, then there was only one answer. A traitor. Or worse, someone inside had turned part of their organization. Coulson swallowed and forced himself to breathe evenly. He stepped forward another slow pace, lifting his chin toward the towering warrior. "I'm very sorry," he said carefully. His tone was calm, respectful, but edged with something heavier. "These men, they wore our colors. But I didn't authorize this. No one in my command gave this order. That means someone inside is moving without our knowledge." Gaius stared down at him, his silence deep and unbroken. The air between them felt thick, heavy. Coulson almost stumbled under the weight of it, but he forced himself to straighten, keeping his voice steady. "You have my word, we didn't send them," Coulson continued. "There are traitors in my organization. I'll find them. But right now, you're hurt. We can get you medical care. A safe place." Gaius tilted his head slightly, as though considering him. His voice finally rumbled out, low and steady. "I need no rest." The calm certainty in his tone sent a shiver down the younger agent's spine. Before Coulson could respond, a roar of engines cut through the night above them. A metallic figure streaked down from the sky, thrusters burning bright. The armored form landed hard enough to crack the pavement, folding its legs before standing tall. "Iron Man!" The helmet peeled back with a hiss, revealing Tony Stark's face. His eyes darted across the bloody street, lingering on the corpses, then moving to Gaius. His mouth tightened into a grim line. Jesus! Tony muttered. His voice was quiet, but the shock in it carried. He walked closer, armor whirring softly. What happened, Gaius? The giant turned slightly toward him. His face was unreadable, calm as ever, though his hands still glistened faintly red. They came for me, Gaius said simply. 10 of them. They tried to capture me. Or kill me. I do not know which. Tony's jaw clenched. He looked at Coulson, suspicion hard in his eyes. These yours? Coulson's hands tightened at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. They wore our uniforms, yes. But I didn't send them. Stark, listen, I was ordered to watch him, not attack. This wasn't me. It wasn't Fury either. Tony's gaze narrowed. So what, your house is dirty? Coulson didn't answer right away. The thought had already hit him, sharp and heavy. Traitors inside their organization. It explained everything. But saying it out loud meant admitting something worse. This wasn't just about one team. If his can be distracted away so they can attack Gaius, then the rot ran deeper than anyone wanted to believe. Coulson glanced once more at the giant, at the calm way he stood among the dead. Then back to Tony. We need to talk, he said finally. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of urgency. Not here. Not in the open. Chapter 15 Truth in the Shadows. The night was quiet outside Stark's mansion, but inside, the air felt heavy. The smell of smoke and blood still lingered faintly on their clothes. The fight had ended, yet no one could relax. The silence of the house only made the memory of the street battle louder in their minds. Tony led the way into the living room. He didn't say a word at first, too lost in thought. Coulson followed close, his face pale but collected. Behind them, Gaius walked with the same calm, his steps slow, steady, almost too heavy for the polished floor beneath his boots. Jarvis, Tony muttered. Lock the house down. Understood, sir, the AI's voice replied, smooth and controlled. All entrances secured. Perimeter clear. Coulson pulled out a secure phone, moving a few steps aside. His voice was low but tense as he called Director Fury. Sir. Gaius were ambushed, yes, uniforms with SHIELD insignia. Heavy weapons. They went after Gaius. Tony glanced over, frowning, hearing only pieces of the talk. No, sir, Coulson added, his tone sharper now. I didn't order them. None of my people did, I didn't even have any knowledge of them. A pause. Then Fury's voice came loud enough for even Tony to faintly catch. Coulson stiffened. Yes, sir. We'll stay put. You're coming? Understood. He hung up, turning to Tony and Gaius. My boss is on his way. He sounded angry. Good, Tony muttered. Because I've got questions too. In the workshop, Tony finally looked back at Gaius. The tall warrior stood straight, his body lit by the soft glow of the workshop's lights. Even with blood on his armor plates, he looked unshaken. You hurt anywhere? Tony asked, almost awkwardly. I am fine, Gaius answered, his deep voice steady. Tony frowned, scanning him. He had seen the man take bullets. Yet now his wounds were already fading, closing like time itself obeyed him. That's not normal, Tony muttered, more to himself. Gaius turned his head slightly. Prepare my armor, Stark. You should as well. Tony blinked, then gave a dry laugh. You don't have to tell me twice. He pointed at the arc reactor on his chest, still glowing, still humming but are now shaped like a triangle, showing it was upgraded but since his chest was healed, it was strapped cleanly in his chest. And thanks to you, I upgraded my arc reactor, compare from before it was much stronger. He snapped his fingers toward his machines. All right, let's get you fitted. Gaius stepped forward, and Tony's workshop came alive. The mechanical arms whirred, reaching out one by one. First, the chest plate. Heavy, layered, gold and blue. It clicked into place over his body with a deep metallic sound. Then the leg plates, locking around his thighs and shins like puzzle pieces. The shoulders, broad and ridged, sealed next. Each piece connected with perfect alignment, as if made only for him. Coulson stood in the corner, trying not to look impressed but failing. He had seen Stark's armor in action before, but this was different. Watching a man like Gaius being armed in something so massive, so otherworldly, felt like standing in a church and seeing a god step down. Finally, the backplate sealed, hissing softly as locks engaged. Gaius remained still the whole time, his eyes calm, his breathing slow. He reached for the helmet resting on the table, holding it at his side rather than putting it on. When the last click echoed, the room fell silent. The silence broke when the elevator dinged. Heavy steps followed. Nick Fury walked in, his black coat sweeping behind him. His single eye moved from Tony, to Coulson, then to Gaius, standing armored, helmet in hand. The tension sharpened instantly. "I didn't order that attack," Fury said flatly. "None of my people did." His voice cut through the room like a blade. He stepped closer, "I never leaving Gaius. But before we move forward, I need to know something." He turned his head slightly, though his gaze stayed locked on the giant warrior. "Where are you from? Because as far as I can tell, you don't exist. And those files the government has on you." He glanced briefly at Stark. "Fake. Clean forgeries. Someone covered your tracks well." Tony gave a half smirk, raising his glass, not denying it. But Gaius finally spoke, his voice steady. "I am from the Imperium. The blade of the Emperor." Fury's brow rose. "Imperium? The hell is that? Some empire?" Gaius's eyes stayed on him. "From Terra. Or Earth, as it was once called." That froze everyone. Tony coughed on his drink, sputtering. "Wait, hold on. You're from Earth." His voice cracked. "I thought you were the same as Naruto, like human, but definitely shouldn't be human, and aren't living in Earth, and thought of you just a different kind of human species that are now interstellar age." He waved a hand, words tumbling over each other. "But Terra? Earth?" Coulson looked lost for words, his usual calm shaken. Even Fury's stern face flickered, just slightly. "Explain," Fury demanded. Tony leaned forward, trying to process. "If you're from Earth, then what are the year?" Gaius spoke. His voice carried no pride, only fact. "From what I see, it is now the year 2008. Tony frowned. "Yet. You're right. From where I came," Gaius continued, "it is the 42nd millennium." The words hit like a hammer. Coulson's eyes widened. His mouth opened, then closed again, unable to even begin a question. Tony froze, glass halfway to his lips. 42nd millennium. His mind ran the math. That's like 10,000 years from now. No, more. 39,000 years. Gaius gave a slow nod. Fury stayed still, face unreadable, though inside his thoughts raced. Nick Fury heard what Tony said, and immediately connected the puzzles in his head. He imagines that Gaius is from the future Earth, and similar to Captain America, a super soldier, and sent by the future to the past, or a accident that caused Gaius to go back in time, though it was Nick Fury imagination, but he forced calm into his voice. "So you're telling me," Fury said slowly, "you're from Earth's future? A future where there's an Imperium? A future where you're still fighting wars?" "Yes," Gaius replied. His tone carried no doubt. The room fell quiet again. Only the faint hum of Stark's machines filled the silence. Tony set his glass down, rubbing his face. "Okay, so you're telling me you're from a future Earth?" He gestured toward Gaius. "You're a soldier from future Earth. And not just any future, 10,000 years away." Tony is quite shocked of this, and thought of the scenes he saw through the live feed, saw the future of humanity. "More," Gaius corrected, calmly, though he didn't think this universe will go through the same as his universe. Coulson muttered under his breath, "This changes everything." Fury kept his composure, but his mind was already moving. This man could be a threat, or an ally. A weapon. Or worse, a warning. Finally, Fury stepped closer, his voice low, steady. "Then we've got a lot to talk about." The words hung heavy in the air. In the workshop of Tony Stark, under the glow of machines and screens, the truth now stood clear. Gaius, armored, silent, unshaken, was not from the stars. He was not from another species. He was from Earth itself. But from a future so far away it was hard to even imagine. And as Nick Fury stared at him, one thought pressed harder than all the rest. If this man was real, then the world they knew had just become much larger. And much more dangerous. Chapter 16 Knowledge of the Warp. The workshop had fallen into silence, heavy enough to press on the chest. The hum of machines, like background noise swallowed by the weight of what had just been spoken. Tony Stark sat hunched forward in his chair, elbows on his knees, one hand pressed across his mouth as if holding back words that wanted to spill out but refused to form. His eyes, sharp and always quick to analyze, lingered on the armored giant standing near the center of the room. Gaius stood tall, helm tucked in the crook of his arm, his blue and gold plate gleaming under the workshop lights. He had been still since finishing his last words, as though carved from stone. His calm was unsettling, there was no boasting in his voice, no attempt at intimidation. Just truth, plain and unmoving. Director Fury leaned against one of the metal work tables, arms crossed, the dim reflection of his single eye caught in the polished surface. Agent Coulson stood at his side, tablet clutched tight, his knuckles pale. None of them seemed ready to speak first. Finally, Tony broke the silence. His voice was low, more strained than he intended. Why? Why did humanity become like yours? He looked up, his expression caught between anger and disbelief. I've seen things in the chat. The future you come from, it was chaos. Worlds burning, people exterminated, demons. Why did it all go that way? Fury's head turned sharply at the words. Worlds burning? Demons. His tone cut like a knife. Coulson's eyes widened as he realized Stark knew more than them. But all three turned back to the giant. Gaius did not flinch. As the son of Robert Guilliman, Gaius began, his deep voice carrying steady through the workshop, I studied what history I could of the Imperium. Yet even I know little. Records are fragments. Truths are half buried beneath centuries of silence. Most of my life, most of my centuries, have been spent in war. The word struck the air like a hammer. Fury narrowed his eye. Centuries. He leaned forward. Just how long have you lived? There was no hesitation. Gaius met his stare directly, his expression calm. More than 300 years. And by the measure of my kind, I am a veteran, but there are many far, far more older than me. Coulson's grip on his tablet faltered, and the device nearly slipped from his hands. He fumbled to steady it, staring at the warrior with his mouth half open, unable to form words. Even Tony sat back in his chair, muttering something under his breath before rubbing at his face with one hand. Fury stayed quiet a moment longer, then asked, his tone softer but edged with weight, then tell me. Who were humanity's enemies? Gaius exhaled slowly. His gaze turned downward for the first time, as though weighing the burden of memory. Chaos and demons. Rebellions. And Xenos. The words landed one by one. Fury and Coulson both latched onto the last two, rebellions they understood, aliens they could imagine. But the first hung in the air, unfamiliar and unsettling. Chaos? Fury asked. His voice was calm, but his eye was sharp. What do you mean by that? And what kind of demons are you talking about? Gaius lowered himself to one of the reinforced couches built for Stark's heavy machinery tests. The frame groaned faintly under his weight, the cushions bending but holding. His armor seemed almost out of place in the modern workshop, yet it made him look all the more immovable. He rested his helm on the table beside him and spoke, his tone measured, as though each word carried a responsibility. The warp. The immaterium. It is the realm that underlies all things. To your eyes, it might be called another dimension, a sea of thought and spirit. It is where the intangible resides, souls, emotions, dreams. But it is not a place of peace. It is the home of demons. Creatures born of emotion, feeding on it. Fear, anger, despair, they are sustenance to them. They whisper to men, twist them, corrupt them until they become slaves to chaos. Even the knowledge of it is dangerous. For when one peers too long into the sea may look back. The room seemed colder for a moment. Tony's fingers drummed against his knee, the rhythm uneven. Coulson had stopped taking notes entirely, tablet hanging at his side as he listened, pale and silent. Fury's expression had hardened, but even he could not hide the tension in his jaw. After a moment, Tony leaned forward, voice rough. I studied your armor earlier, when you took it off. His words picked up pace, as if speaking could push back the unease. Especially that reactor you wear on your back. It's stable, efficient, cleaner than anything I've ever designed. But there's no computer in it. Nothing to help you fight. Why? Why does your tech look so advanced in some ways, but in others, like it stepped backward centuries? Gaius inclined his head slowly, as though expecting the question. Because of the warp. Even the smallest machine with a mind, even the most simple artificial intelligence, can be touched. It becomes a weapon for the enemy. It becomes a door for corruption. That is why AI is forbidden in the Imperium. The words cut deep into Stark. He sat still for once, jaw tightening. For him, AI was the foundation of progress, the core of what he built, the extension of himself. To hear it declared dangerous, not by theory but truths and experiences, shook him more than he cared to admit. Silence lingered until Tony asked again, more quietly this time. Then how do you even put it on? That armor, you don't just slip into it. If you can't use machines or AI to help, what do? You can't possibly manage it alone. Gaius's eyes lifted, steady as stone. Servitors and chapter serfs. Servitors are men made into machines. Their minds stripped, their bodies reforged into tools. They labor without complaint. Chapter serfs are men and women sworn to serve from birth, their lives dedicated to the care of warriors like myself. Between them, the armor is donned quickly, and without failure. Coulson's throat tightened, his face showing the faintest flicker of unease. The thought of men turned into machines, their humanity carved away, gnawed at something deep in him. Stark stared down at the floor, lips pressed into a thin line. Fury only listened, though the weight in his stare was unmistakable. The workshop was quiet again, but this silence was not the awkward pause of before. It was the silence of men grappling with truths too large to measure, truths that pressed down on the soul like a weight. Fury broke it first. His voice was calm, but each word carried the gravity of a man who had seen the world tilt in a single night. If even half of what you said is true, then we're standing in the shadow of something far bigger than any of us. Stark leaned back, one hand running through his hair, the words escaping him in a mutter. And it makes my problems look like child's play. Coulson said nothing. He only looked at the giant seated before them, his pen forgotten, the tablet dark in his hand. Chapter 17 Departure of the Son of Guilliman. The room inside Stark's mansion was quiet after the storm of revelations. Fury's one eye kept watching the giant armored figure before him, his mind working through everything he had seen. Gaius stood like a statue, the light from the glass windows glinting off his blue and gold armor. Fury's instinct screamed at him to press harder. He wanted answers. Answers about where Gaius came from, what war he fought in, and if Earth was in danger because of him. But before he could speak, Gaius's gaze grew distant. His body remained still, yet it was clear he was no longer fully present. Inside his mind, the familiar voice of the multiversal chat system appeared. Mission report: primary target, Obadiah Stane eliminated. Objective, save Tony Stark achieved. Sub-objective, cure palladium poisoning achieved. Reward unlocked, postal system. A new prompt appeared in glowing text. Will you return now? Yes/no. Time limit, 1 year. Gaius's eyes narrowed slightly. A choice. Remain longer in this world, or return to his duty in the Imperium. He thought of the peaceful skies he had seen, the open laughter of civilians, and the simple joy of people living without the shadow of constant war. For a heartbeat, he allowed himself to feel the weight of it. But he knew his answer. His war was not here. When his focus returned, Fury noticed the change in his expression. You're going to tell me what happens next, big guy? Gaius's voice was calm, measured, and solemn. My mission here is finished. Tony, leaning against the counter with a half-finished glass of water, raised a brow. Finished, hey? Just like that? You save my life, take down Obi, heal me up, and then, you just leave. The armored warrior looked at him. Yes. My duty was clear. You are alive, Stark. Tony opened his mouth to argue, but then stopped. Deep inside, he felt it too, the mission window that only members of the chat group could see. It was clear. Gaius had done what he came to do. For once, Tony Stark didn't crack a joke. He set down his glass and crossed the room. Listen, Gaius. I don't know what kind of soldier you are, or what kind of war you're fighting out there. But you saved me. And that's not something I take lightly. Even though he had seen the live feed of what Gaius was fighting, but as he said, he doesn't understand it. He extended his hand. It was small compared to the giant armored gauntlet before him, but he held it steady. Gaius looked at the hand for a moment, then clasped it with careful strength. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. You owe me nothing, Gaius said. Live well. That'll be enough. Tony gave a short, tired smile. That might be the hardest mission of all. In the corner, Fury didn't move. His mind was running. So you show up out of nowhere, wearing armor that no one on Earth can build, and then disappear once your mission is done. You expect me to accept that? Gaius turned his helmet toward him. What you accept does not change truth. My duty was here, and now it is not. Fury clenched his jaw. He wanted to push harder, to demand details, but he could see it in Gaius's bearing, the man would not speak further. Not because he was hiding some trick, but because his path was already set. The silence stretched. Then Gaius broke it. The armor began to hum softly, golden light tracing across its surface. Small arcs of energy rippled along his frame, filling the air with a low vibration. Tony took a step back, eyes widening. You're really going back, hey? Yes. Then, try not to die in that hellhole you're walking into. Tony Stark used the most accurate word he can say about the world of Gaius. I do not intend to. Tony smirked faintly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of sadness. Figures. Guy like you doesn't intend anything less. And then the light grew brighter. Streams of radiance wrapped around Gaius, breaking his form into pieces of brilliance. In seconds, the giant warrior was gone, leaving only silence. Fury exhaled through his nose. Well, damn. Coulson, who had stayed quiet until now, murmured, so it really was a mission. Fury crossed his arms again. No. It's more than that. And I don't like not knowing what it means. For Gaius, the light faded as quickly as it came. His boots met the cold metal floor of the Oath of Rectitude once more. The faint hum of the ship's engines filled his ears, familiar and grounding. He took a breath. Despite what felt like days spent in Stark's world, here only hours had passed. The strange difference between realities never failed to unsettle him, but he has more important duties than worry. His war waited. He opened the interface of the chat. Naruto's avatar was glowing, messages already scrolling. Naruto, oh. The mission's complete. That's awesome. Saeko, I'm glad. Tony now should be healed then. Moments later, Stark's icon lit up, joining the feed. Tony, alive and kicking. And thanks to our knight in shining armor, I'm better than ever. Oh, and apparently we've unlocked something called a postal system. Sounds like interdimensional mail. We might be able to send each other supplies. Naruto exploded with excitement. Naruto, supplies? You mean food? Pizza? Ice cream? Count me in. Saeko, of course, Naruto. Though you'll have to learn patience if it takes days to arrive. As it was named postal, it might take time to even arrive, if someone ever delivered supplies. Tony, patience isn't his strong suit, is it? Saeko, not at all. Their laughter, even through text, warmed the cold edge of Gaius's world. He didn't type anything, only watched. For a moment, he let the feeling linger. Then he closed the chat. The ship's corridors stretched long and dim. The scent of incense and steel lingered, a mixture that felt like home. Servitors moved in silence, carrying out their endless tasks, while mortal crew members bowed their heads as he passed. A navigator approached him, bowing low. Lord Gaius. We will reach the designated system in a few hours. Perhaps a day at most. Gaius inclined his head. Good. Inform me the moment we arrive. Yes, my lord. The navigator stepped back, disappearing into the flow of the ship's crew. Gaius walked on, each step a reminder of who he was, a son of Gilliman, a warrior forged for endless duty. The peace he had glimpsed in Stark's world lingered in his thoughts, but he knew such peace was not for him. Still, a part of him carried it forward, like a spark in the dark. Chapter 18 The New Member. The Oath of Rectitude drifted in the endless sea of the warp. Its massive hull groaned as unseen forces pressed against the shimmering barrier that protected it. The glow of the Geller field flickered faintly, holding back shapes that twisted and clawed from the other side. Inside, the crew whispered prayers, their voices a low chant that echoed through the steel halls. Gaius walked with steady steps. His blue and gold armor reflected the dim lantern light as he made his way to the stratagem. Every sound of the ship, the hum of engines, the shuffle of robed servitors, the faint hiss of incense burners, was familiar to him. It was the music of duty. A navigator approached, bowing deeply before speaking. Lord Gaius. We near the edge of the warp. In a short while, we will return to real space. Understood, Gaius said. His voice was calm, steady, as though he had heard the same words countless times before. Yet in his heart, he always carried a weight when the ship neared the edge. The warp was never safe, and every passage was a battle of its own. He turned to leave, but just then, the familiar sound of the chat system appeared in his mind. A soft chime. A glowing tag. Multiversal chat notification Saeko, at Gaius Maximer Thasser, there's a new member, again. Naruto. Another one? Awesome. Gaius opened the chat. A new username had appeared. Hit Girl. Across another world entirely, a young girl lay on her bed. Her name was Mindy McCready. Her purple wig was tossed carelessly onto a chair, and her blood-stained suit hung on a hook nearby. She had just returned from another night with her father, another night of hunting men who thought themselves untouchable. Her muscles ached. Her mind buzzed with the images of violence. She had grown used to it, but some nights it still followed her into sleep. She closed her eyes, trying to drift off. That was when glowing words appeared before her eyes. Multiversal Chat Group connecting. User located cross-dimensional signature detected. Link established. Welcome, new user. Mindy sat up, startled. The hell? She whispered. For a moment she thought she was seeing things, maybe she was too tired, maybe it was her brain after the fight. But the words didn't vanish. They stayed, hanging in her vision. Then she saw something stranger still. A live chat, messages scrolling as though she had joined some kind of secret group. Saeko, at Gaius Maximer Thasser, there's a new member, again. Naruto, new member again, awesome. Tony Stark, why doesn't Hit Girl speak? Is she like Gaius? Silent type. Naruto, maybe she's fighting right now. Saeko, or she doesn't believe this is real. Mindy hesitated, her fingers twitching as though she could type into thin air. Finally, she gave in. Mindy, hi. I'm Mindy. The chat came alive at once. Naruto, hello. I'm Naruto. And I'm a ninja. Mindy blinked. A ninja? She almost laughed, but part of her wondered if he was serious. Saeko, I am Saeko. I study at Fujimi Academy. It is nice to meet you. Her words felt formal, calm. Mindy wasn't sure what to make of her. Tony Stark, genius billionaire philanthropist. You'll get used to me. That one made Mindy stop. Tony Stark? She thought of the magazines her father sometimes left around, the stories about weapons, tech, and some playboy who was always in the spotlight. Was this really him? Finally, after a long pause, another line appeared. Gaius Maximer Thasser, I am Gaius Maximer Thasser. The weight of his words was different. Mindy couldn't explain it, but even through text, it felt heavy. Saeko quickly spoke up. Saeko, Gaius, the live feed before, it's stored. The multiversal chat can record it. And it can be downloaded into our own worlds. Tony Stark, wait, what? You mean I can save these feeds? Video files. Tony is excited, doesn't this means he can show off Gaius, especially with Nick Fury kept asking information from him about Gaius. Saeko, yes. It needs a device with enough memory. A computer, a phone, anything that can store the data. Naruto, memory space? What are you guys talking about? Tony laughed in text. Tony Stark, don't worry, kid. I'll explain later. Tony's tone shifted. Tony Stark, Gaius, you're about to go into a war, right? Gaius Maximer Thasser, yes. Indeed I am. Tony Stark, then open the live feed. Let us watch as well. For a moment, there was no answer. Mindy waited, holding her breath. She didn't know why, but she felt nervous. Whoever this Gaius was, the others seemed to respect him in a way that was different from Tony's jokes or Naruto's energy. Finally, the system chimed. Gaius Maximer Thasser has opened a live feed. Do you wish to enter? Yes/no. Mindy's heart thumped. Without thinking, she said yes. Her world spun. The bed, the room, the city outside, it all vanished. She felt her body lift, weightless, and then she was standing, or floating, on a cold metal floor inside a place too large for her mind to grasp. Voices called her name. She turned. Naruto was there, spinning in the air like a child at play. Saeko floated calmly, her long hair drifting in the strange weightless space. And Tony Stark stood close by, his usual smirk softened into something warmer. But then her eyes lifted higher. And she froze. A giant stood before them. His armor shone blue and gold, towering higher than she thought possible. He was like a statue of war, carved from steel and light. Mindy felt small, so small that she barely reached his waist. For the first time in a long time, she felt like a child again. Tony stepped closer, lowering his voice as though to steady her. Hello, Mindy, right? She nodded quickly. Her eyes darted to Naruto, who was laughing as he drifted upside down in the air. She couldn't help but stare. Flying. She wanted to try it too. Tony followed her gaze and chuckled. You can float too, you know. But don't go too far. We can't move more than 10 meters from Gaius. Mindy bit her lip, then leaned forward. She drifted a little, floating slowly. A small smirk tugged at her lips. It felt strange, but also fun. Saeko, meanwhile, moved calmly to Gaius's side. Her voice was soft but curious. Are you on a mission? Where are we? The giant turned his head slightly, his eyes glowing faintly beneath his helm. His voice was calm, steady, like stone that had stood for ages. We are in the warp. Soon, we will emerge. The group fell quiet. Around them stretched an endless storm of color and shadow. Shapes twisted in the void beyond the Geller field, pressing against the light, only to vanish like smoke. The ship trembled now and then, but the barrier held. Mindy hugged her arms, floating near Tony and Naruto. She didn't understand this place, but she knew one thing, this wasn't her world anymore. And yet, somehow, she was here with them. Deep in the ship, a voice called out, clear and sharp. Lord Gaius. We are moments from real space. The giant stood taller, his armor humming faintly. His war waited. And the others, though only shadows in his world, waited with him. Chapter 19 First Clash. The warp fell away. One moment, the oath of rectitude was drifting through storms of color and shadow, where voices whispered and shapes clawed at the Geller field. The next, the storm broke, and real space returned. Stars glittered across a dark sky. The void stretched endless and calm, sharp and cold compared to the warp's madness. Gaius stood tall on the command deck, his blue and gold armor reflecting the soft light of the viewing screens. The navigator bowed low, his third eye sealed. My lord, we have reached the Helicer system. Gaius gave a short nod. Well done. He opened his vox, his deep voice carrying across the ship. Brothers. Gather. Arm and prepare. The enemy awaits. The sound of his words spread through every deck, bouncing against steel walls and echoing down long halls. The oath of rectitude was awake now. Its crew hurried in silence, each movement precise and drilled into them by endless years of duty. The chamber filled with the sound of giants. 12 Astartes warriors gathered, their steps heavy against the deck. 9 were battle brothers in a tech marine, clad in blue armor that bore scars of countless fights and 1 red armor. 2 were young primaris, taller and broader, their armor newer, less marked. They checked their weapons with steady hands. Bolters clicked as magazines slid home. Chain swords roared to life, then fell silent again. Combat knives, simple but sharp, were sheathed at their belts. Each movement was calm, practiced, without waste. Only Gaius stood apart. His bolter was mag-locked to his chest, but at his side hung something more. A blade, sheathed in black and bound with gold, a power sword, humming faintly with restrained energy. It marked him as their commander, as the hand of the Emperor among them, and with the highest achievement. The multiversal chat hummed to life again. Their voices echoed in Gaius's mind, but only he could hear them as he walked among his brothers. Naruto shouted first. Naruto, they're all huge. But wait, Gaius is even bigger than the rest. Gaius ignored the words, but the truth was plain. Even among the Primaris, Gaius's frame carried more weight, more presence. His armor seemed to hum with age and purpose, where the younger Primaris were still fresh, new to the burdens of war. Saeko, so this is how an Ultramarine looked like. Her tone was calm, almost reverent, as she ever only saw Gaius, and the corpses of others Ultramarine, through the first live feed. Tony Stark, 12 guys like this could probably control a country on Earth. Fury would lose his mind if he saw this feed. Mindy, she was silent at first, only watching. Her eyes tracked the way the Marines moved, how their steps were the same, how none of them fumbled. They were machines, but also men. She felt small, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of small that made her want to keep watching. The stratagem chamber was lit with hollow screens showing maps of the Helisar system. Gaius stood at the head, his warriors gathered in silence. He spoke clearly, each word heavy. Our mission is threefold. First, eliminate the leaders of the enemy. Warlords, dark champions, demons. All must fall. Second, break their command structure. Destroy their strongholds, cripple their coordination, leave them blind. Third, prepare the field for the Crusade fleet. We strike first. The fleet will follow. Together, we will cleanse these worlds. The Marines gave no reply. They did not need to. Their silence was agreement. The doors hissed open. A chapter serf entered quickly, bowing low. His voice was urgent but steady. My lord. Enemy ship sighted. Helisar 4, orbiting above the Forge world. Gaius walked past him, his steps slow and sure. The others followed like a wall of steel. On the viewing deck, the augur display lit up. A massive shape floated near the red surface of Helisar 4. It was no ordinary ship. It looked like a fortress given engines, thick armor plating, gun batteries jutting like teeth, its surface scarred but still defiant. Gaius knew it at once. His voice was calm, but there was weight in it. The traitors. The Iron Warriors. The serf's hands shook slightly as he spoke. Only one ship, my lord. No others detected nearby. Gaius narrowed his eyes. One ship. That meant a warband, not a full force. But with Iron Warriors, even a few were deadly. They were masters of siege and fortification. Behind him, his marines stood silent, waiting for his words. Gaius turned to them. They control the Forge world. With it, they arm themselves. They are few, hundreds, perhaps, but they are Iron Warriors. They will be ready. They will be dug deep. The ship above us is already aware of us, as we are of them. Brothers, steel yourselves. He pointed toward the tech marine, his voice steady. You. Break their void shield. The tech marine bowed without a word. His hands moved across runes and controls, activating torpedo bays. The oath of rectitude roared as torpedoes launched. Trails of fire streaked across the void toward the Iron Warrior ship. But the traitors were ready. Batteries lit up, shells exploding in bursts of light, tearing many torpedoes apart before they could land. Still, some struck home, slamming against the ship's shimmering void shields. The shields held, but their glow dimmed. The enemy returned fire. Great blasts of energy shot across space. The oath of rectitude shuddered, void shields sparking as they absorbed the blows. Alarms rang, but the crew held steady. The two ships circled each other in the dark, fortress against fortress. Tony Stark, that's not a ship, that's a whole skyscraper turned into a gun. Naruto, this is awesome. It's like a giant ninja battle, but with ships. Saeko, so this is war in space, every move is life or death. It's beautiful, it's what Saeko thought had in mind. Mindy whispered without meaning to. It's beautiful, and terrible. Hit after hit struck the Iron Warrior's void field. Bit by bit, the light around their ship flickered weaker and weaker. Finally, it failed. The glow vanished. The ship was bare. Gaius's voice cut through the noise. Tech Marine, remain. Command the oath. Keep us covered. The Tech Marine bowed again and turned back to the control decks. Gaius looked at his brothers. The rest of you, come with me. The Marines split into two squads. Great boarding torpedoes hissed open, their chambers lined with thick walls and harnesses. The warriors entered without a word, locking themselves into place. Gaius stepped into one, towering above the others. His bolter was secured to his chest, and his hand rested on the hilt of his sheathed power sword. Before the doors closed, he spoke through the vox, his voice calm but carrying like a drumbeat. Brothers! We descend into the heart of traitors. They will be many. They will be fortified. But they are not chosen of the Emperor. We are. We'll bring the Emperor wrath to this traitor legion, and lay waste to them. The torpedoes locked into firing tubes. The chamber shook. Then, thunder. Two great bolts of steel shot out from the Oath of Rectitude, streaking across the stars toward the fortress ship of the Iron Warriors. Their trails burned bright against the void. Inside, the Astartes sat in silence, braced for impact, their hearts steady. In the multiversal chat, not one voice spoke. Naruto, Tony, Saeko, and Mindy all held their breath, watching. The torpedoes raced closer. The fortress loomed larger and larger. Chapter 20 Into the Maw. The fortress ship shook as the boarding torpedoes hit. The sound was like thunder inside the metal beast, echoing through its halls. Walls bent, steel groaned, and fire burst from the cracks where molten edges still glowed. From the torn holes, blue and gold-armored giants surged forward. The Ultramarines. They moved as one. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Every step was measured, every weapon raised and ready. Gaius was the first through the breach. His bolter barked 3 sharp bursts, and 3 twisted slaves dropped where they stood. The recoil barely moved his massive frame. He didn't slow. Behind him, his brothers fanned out, spreading into a tight circle to secure the entry. The smell hit them almost instantly. Burned oil, rotting flesh, the stench of a ship corrupted from within. From the darkness ahead, the first wave came. Human slaves, if they could still be called that. Metal spikes were drilled into their arms. Wires stuck out of their backs. Their eyes glowed dim red from cheap augmetics. They rushed like animals, screaming as they charged. The Ultramarines answered with fire. Bolter rounds tore them apart, each shot exploding inside their broken bodies. Blood, sparks, and steel fragments sprayed the walls. Chain swords growled as they ripped through bone. One slave got close enough to leap. Gaius didn't even raise his weapon. His gauntlet fist met the man's head mid-air. The skull exploded like fruit under a hammer. The body dropped twitching to the ground. Naruto, wait, he just punched that guy's head clean off. That's insane. Tony, okay. Okay. Reminding myself again to never get on his bad side. Saeko, efficient. No wasted effort. They cut through them like weeds. Mindy, it's scary how calm they are. Like this is just another day. Naruto, what were those people? They have metal stuck in them and are crazy. The corridor was clear. Smoke drifted, the floor slick with blood and oil. Form up, Gaius said. His voice was calm, steady, carried through the comms with weight. The Ultramarines tightened their formation. Their boots thundered on the deck as they pressed forward. Slaves kept rushing them in waves, but it didn't matter. Bolter fire answered every charge. Chain blades cut down anyone who slipped through. The Astartes marched like a wall of iron. For every dozen that came, none lasted more than seconds. Tony, I get it now, this is what soldiers look like when they're made for war, not just trained for it. Tony now truly thinks that Gaius or Ultramarines are similar to Captain America, truly a super soldier of their times. Naruto, they don't even stop moving. Not even for a second. Saeko, they are very disciplined. They don't break formation. Mindy, it's like a machine made of people. The deeper they went, the louder the ship sounded. Pipes groaned. Engines rumbled somewhere below. The heat grew. And then, the first real enemy appeared. Iron Warriors. They stepped from the shadows, massive in dull grey armor scarred with battle damage. Spikes jutted from their pauldrons. Their eye lenses glowed red like furnaces. Heavy bolters and autocannons roared almost instantly. The corridor shook under the weight of their fire. Walls exploded in sprays of steel. Shrapnel tore through the air. The Ultramarines took cover, returning fire in short, precise bursts. Bolter shells cracked against the Iron Warrior's armor, but the traitors stood firm, firing without pause. Tony, oh great! Bigger guys with bigger guns. Of course. Naruto, they're just shooting non-stop. How do they not run out? as Naruto was also briefly introduced to firearms, so he has some knowledge of it. Saeko, Gaius enemies are shooting non-stop like they don't care about ammunitions. Mindy. Pinned down by the storm of fire, Gaius raised one hand. A silent signal. The squads shifted. Weapons covered different angles. Firing arcs overlapped. The kill zone tightened. And then, he moved. He surged from cover, bolter in one hand, power sword in the other. Rounds screamed past him. Sparks flew as shells cracked against his armor. But he didn't slow. Slaves rushed into his path, trying to shield their masters. Bolter shots from his left hand tore holes through them. His sword flashed in his right, cutting apart anything that got close. The Ultramarines laid down covering fire, forcing the traitors to adjust. The pressure cracked their rhythm. Tony, Gaius. Well, it was quite dangerous, but expected with the strength of his armor. Naruto, that's crazy. He didn't even flinch. Seeing Gaius just ignore the enemy's shots at him and running straight to it. Saeko, that's not madness. I think that's confidence. He knows exactly how much he can take. Mindy, I don't think he even doubts himself. One iron warrior broke ranks to meet him. The traitor roared, chain sword swinging. Steel clashed with crackling blue as the power sword met the spinning teeth. Sparks exploded, the sound like grinding thunder. The two giants slammed into each other. Their blows shook the walls. Each strike could have cut a tank in half. The Iron Warrior pressed hard, his chain sword screaming. But Gaius didn't give ground. He shifted, blade flashing faster, sharper, precise. And then, one clean cut. The power sword sliced through armor and flesh in one stroke. The traitor fell, his body split and sparking. Gaius didn't stop. His momentum carried him forward, deeper into the line. Naruto, he just cut that guy in half. That was insane. Tony, this is like watching a tank fight a tank, only in close combats. Saeko, not brute strength. Precision. He used the enemy's own weight against him. As she is also highly skilled in kendo, though she would look like a beginner compared to Gaius. Mindy, he makes it look easy. That's the scary part. The biggest Iron Warrior loomed at the end of the corridor, hefting a massive cannon. He swung it to fire. But Gaius was already there. The power sword flashed. The gun arm fell to the ground with a shower of sparks. The traitor roared, swinging his other fist, but Gaius met it with his own. The Ultramarine's punch crashed into the helmet, caving it in like tin. The Iron Warrior staggered, somehow still alive. Gaius didn't hesitate. His sword came down again and again, each strike tearing apart armor, each blow breaking the body within. Finally, the traitor fell in pieces at his feet. The rest of the squad broke under the Ultramarine's fire. Bolter rounds hammered into them until silence returned. Slaves lay in torn heaps. Shattered armor marked where Iron Warriors had stood. The air was thick with smoke and the stink of blood. Gaius stood tall, his armor scarred, glowing faintly from the heat of impacts. His sword dripped with oil and blood. He raised his bolter, scanning the shadows. "Forward," he said. His voice steady, calm. "To the engine room." The Ultramarines reloaded in silence. No words wasted. The march continued. Boots pounding, bolters ready, formation unbroken. Deeper into the maw of the fortress ship. With the chat members floating above Gaius and watching the fight very clearly.
Thanks for listening.